All right, ladies and gentlemen, quick update before we get into the video. My friend and I, Chuck, we are starting a new podcast. It's called The New Consensus. We're going to be doing a weekly podcast. We're going to be talking about politics, geopolitics, culture, history, philosophy, maybe. I don't know. We might dabble in a little bit of everything. So if you guys enjoy my show, if you guys enjoy my commentary, you'll definitely enjoy his. He's a great guy. He's very knowledgeable. He's very interesting. He's got a greater sense of humor than mine. So if you guys want to see that, I'm going to leave a link to the channel in the description. It's called The New Consensus. The space new space consensus. So please go subscribe. We'll probably be posting our first video sometime next week. But yeah, with that being said, let's get right into the video. Today I'm going to be reacting to this interview right here with Ezra Klein. It's called The Groipification of the GOP. And he's going to be talking all about Nick Fuentes. Now, for those of you who don't know by now, I am America First. And I don't know if I would call myself a supporter of Nick Fuentes, but I agree with many of the things that the guy says, actually. You know, I'm America First. He's America First. I'm not a lib. Ezra Klein is a lib, but I think that in this moment where we are right now politically, I really do think it is important to try to have some charity, some good faith. I don't like Ezra Klein. I don't like Vosh, Hassan Piker. I don't like any of these people, but Ezra Klein is a good faith actor. And on that basis alone, I have more respect for him than like 95% of the people on the political left online. Like Vosh, Destiny, Hassan, like I don't even know what to say about those people. And actually, let me go back to full screen. I don't even know what to say about Vosh, Destiny, Hassan. These people have no charity, none whatsoever. I mean, they call people Nazi, fascist. They said this about Charlie Kirk the day after he died. They were making memes about the guy. I mean, Destiny is on X, really Twitter. I don't even like the term X, but he's on Twitter posting Charlie Kirk memes to people he replies to. It's very strange. These people, it's like almost like a death cult. And I do find these people to be vile at times and very stubborn. But, you know, Ezra is more redeemable. And I think in this moment that we're in right now, the reason why I do what I do, the reason why I even have this channel to begin with, is because I want people to cultivate a civilizational consciousness, a nationalist consciousness, and I want people to break away from the chains of wokeness, political correctness, you know, having to clarify or qualify everything that you say, constantly stumbling over yourself not to offend people. If we're going to defeat wokeness, if we're going to defeat the left, we need to embrace our identity as members of a civilization and constituents of a nation. Embrace our citizenship because that means something. Sure, we might not be racially or ethnically homogenous, but we are all one historically. We are all one linguistically. We are all one nationally. And we all have to fight for the future of this country and the ethos of our nation. And that means fighting against cultural Marxism, fighting against the vile, poisonous ideas of the left, which seek to undermine nationalism, undermine Western civilization, and achieve this kind of globo homo agenda, which I think is despicable. And so for me, I want to cultivate a kind of civilizational consciousness in the people who watch these videos, and a nationalist consciousness in the people who watch these videos. Whether you're white or not, doesn't really matter. We are all in this together at the end of the day. I do feel that way strongly. And that's why I consider myself America First. You know, I don't want to prioritize all these subnational identities, Jewish, lesbian, woman from New York City who's a mom or shopkeeper who likes to garden in her free time. Like, no, that is way too atomized. And that's what the left wants to do, atomize people and create a coalition of people who are marginalized on all these different identities, whether they're gay, trans, black, Hispanic, Asian, female, LGBTQ+, all this kind of stuff. And I'm not with that at all. I want to build a coalition of Americans who love America, who are nationalists, who want to lock down the borders, who want to do mass deportations, who want to regain our sovereignty from foreign governments, and who want to fight corruption in the federal government and get everybody in Congress off the payroll of a damn billionaire. That's it. The request is very simple. And Fuentes right now is the only vehicle that seems to be heading in that direction. The left just seems to want to complain and whine about fascism and Nazism and all this kind of ridiculous stuff. They're anti-mass deportations, which I think is ridiculous. What's more un-American than allowing tens of millions of people to flock into your country illegally and take jobs from the people who live there? Our citizenship has to mean something. This is our birthright. And to let all these people come in unpunished to work and undercut our wages is the most ridiculous thing on earth. And there's nobody on the left who's pushing for that. So from my perspective, these people are just un-American. I think everybody on the left right now in 2025 is un-American on that basis alone. That being said, I have my disagreements with Fuentes. I'm not like a Fuentes shill, but I think I generally agree with the thrust of what he says. So that's my take on that. I'll give you guys my take on this entire video, and I'm going to be good faith and open-minded here, and I'm going to approach this with a willingness to understand, but I just want you guys to have some context on what I believe and on my perspective, so you guys aren't blindsided by the things that I say. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into this reaction. I don't want to talk too much longer, suck all the oxygen out of the room. Let's go ahead and get right into this. Let's do this. Ezra, show me what you got.
If by the stroke of good fortune or just being a normal person, you had not heard of Nick Fuentes until this month.
Why does everybody say it like that? Nick Fuentes? It's Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes. It's not hard to pronounce. Fuentes, Fuentes, Fuentes. I heard Steve Bannon on his show earlier today say Fuentes. Fuentes. It's Fuentes. It's not difficult to pronounce. People overcomplicate it with these Hispanic last names. I have a Hispanic last name, Banos. But it's like people try to do all this extra stuff. Baños. It's like, just say Banos. I don't get it.
Chances are you've heard of him now.
Nick Fuentes is odious and despicable.
He's what I would call a racist. He's just this troll.
Nick Fuentes has said a long list of very vile things.
Big time. He's a booger-eating, white supremacist Holocaust denier.
The reason everybody's talking about Fuentes is Tucker Carlson, who is arguably at this point the most significant media figure on the American right, hosted Fuentes, a person he has feuded with in the past, for a very friendly 2-hour chat.
I wanted to meet you. I've heard about you.
I've heard about you.
About the problem of Israel, about the problem of American Jews and whether or not they fit in this country or their loyalties are elsewhere.
If you're China first, you should live in China. If you're Mexico first, you should live in Mexico. If you're Israel first, maybe you should go live in Israel.
True.
It was the kind of conversation you would not have heard among mainstream figures on the American right.
It's because the Overton window is shifting. And it's because everybody recognizes we are in a crisis right now, and the left has no solutions. Our country is being invaded by illegals. Cost of living is through the roof. Nobody can afford anything. We have a demographic crisis with rapidly changing demographics in this country. We have a birth crisis. The left just killed Charlie Kirk and laughed about it. These people are pro-mass migration. They're pushing gender trans ideology. I mean, what about the left is attractive? The entire reason the country moved further to the right is because the left sucks. There's nothing on the left worth aligning yourself with. These people are terrible. Their politics are terrible. They hate this country. Half the people who are on the left hate this country. They see it as racist, nativist, patriarchal, all this kind of stuff. And notice this is what the left does. Every time the left criticizes somebody on the right, they do this thing called linguistic spellcasting or categorical weaponization, where they'll take a label and they'll throw it at someone and then they'll dismiss them because they can't negate the ideas. This is what everybody on the left does. You're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're a sexist, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist. That's their entire argument. These people are just like it's literally policing your conscience. And this is exactly why nobody likes the left right now, because young men don't like the left because they want to police your conscience. They want to police everything you say. You can't say that. That's mean. That's sexist. That's racist. You're a Nazi. You're a white supremacist. Like, we're being over-socialized to conform to all these ridiculous standards that didn't exist 30 years ago. That's why people are fed up. That's why we voted for Trump. We want to be free of this. We want to be unshackled from these ridiculous feminist standards and this liberal nonsense. We're being told everything is offensive. Everything is racist. We can't continue to live this way. It's oppressive. And this is the revolution. That's why people like Fuentes. That's just what it is. And this right here is a prime example. Always with the names. You're racist. You're fascist. Why don't we just have a regular conversation and we see where we disagree or agree? But all the names, all the name calling, it's just absurd.
In recent decades, what we are watching is a very old strain of the right vying for control of its future. This right goes back to Pat Buchanan. It goes back to Charles Lindbergh. The idea that the right should be an ethno-nationalist coalition.
See, like there it is again, ethno-nationalist. America First is not an ethno-nationalist movement. I'm in America First. I'm brown and black. I'm mixed between black and Hispanic. And I'm in America First. It's not an ethno-nationalist movement. What the entire gist of the America First movement is white people in America should not become the demographic minority, which I agree with, or in Western civilization. And this is, look at Singapore. They tightly control their demographics. The demographics in Singapore have been identical for like the past 60, 70 years. You have to control your demographics. Demographics do affect the culture, the cohesion, the trajectory of your country in obvious ways. This is what liberals don't understand. They think everybody's like this blank slate. No, people have race, culture, genetics, history, lineage, identities, and they're all bundled into one, and people don't just assimilate overnight. You have to control your demographics. So it's not this ethno-nationalist movement. They're just saying white people should remain the demographic majority and they should be respected in society, and we shouldn't have an anti-white country, which I agree. The entire left is anti-white. All of them. They're complaining about the Sydney Sweeney ads. They're complaining about Sydney Sweeney not apologizing when she was confronted last week by this reporter who was trying to get her with this gotcha. Do you condemn white supremacy? Like, this is the kind of stuff we're sick of. Everything is about white supremacy and this and that. This is the rebellion. This is the revolution. We all want to be free from this. We all want to get past this, like, you know, Donald Glover, America, KKK, America, KKK, or the Kendrick Lamar with the Super Bowl subliminal messaging, or the Jordan Peele movie, Everything is Racist, or Tariq Nasheed talking about white supremacy. It's like, we're done, we're done, we're done. It's the same thing. He said it about the Holocaust. We don't want to be reminded about the Holocaust every single day. We don't want to be reminded about slavery every single day. We don't want to be reminded about the Native Americans being wiped out every single day. This country has changed. It's evolved. New people are here. And yes, we should address these things, but it doesn't have to be where if you don't bend your knee to the dogma, you're a horrible person. This is what liberals do. It's a purity test. And we're sick of it. This is the revolution. Enough with this civility politics nonsense. This is the revolution. So just notice what he's doing here. He's already trying to spellcast America First as an ethno-nationalist movement. That's not really what it is. It's more nuanced than that. But this is what these people do. They don't even understand. They just come up with words and dismiss you.
Which doesn't have room for immigrants, very much does not have room maybe for Jews, that is really not comfortable with anyone who's not what they call a heritage American.
We do need to be Christian.
Nick literally makes fun of the term heritage American. I don't know what his point is.
We do, on some level, need to be pro-white, not to the exclusion of everybody else, but recognizing that white people have a special heritage here as Americans.
That's not a ridiculous claim. See, the fact that that's considered a ridiculous claim is insane. See, this is the problem. If we have to develop a nationalist consciousness, a civilizational consciousness. This country was created by WASPs. Dissenting Protestantism created the very ethos of this country going all the way back to the colonial period, where each subsequent generation of Protestants would splinter from the previous to create their own sect of Protestantism, which created the ethos of individualism and this passion for freedom and liberty and curiosity and this rejection of orthodoxy and hierarchy. The reason America is as free as it is, the reason we have the Constitution we have, the creed, the American creed, the Constitution, was written based on the demographics and the ethos of the country at that time, which came from American Protestantism. Yes, it absolutely is just a fact that white Anglo-Saxon Protestants going all the way back to the 1600s created the very foundation of this country, the ethos of this country, and it exists to this very day. To say what he's saying is historically true. But liberals always want to do this thing where it's racist and you can't say that and that's exclusionary. No, it's just real. We're one country, one history, and we all have to work together to produce a better nation. And if you're not with that, if you think that's racist, if you think that's exclusionary, that's on you. Let me stop pausing, but it's already within the first 1 minute and 48 seconds, we already have to just dismiss all the ridiculous stuff that these people are saying, that he's saying.
Americans.
This has been a logic and an ideology that Trump has broken into the mainstream.
That's what we're all about. America first.
America first.
And that is now following itself to its full expression. If you buy into this, well, it has a place it goes. And now we are seeing more figures on the American right truly going there. To talk about it, I want to bring on John Gans. Gans is sort of hard to describe. I think he's become a popular political theorist and historian. He writes the great Substack Unpopular Front. He wrote the book When the Clock Broke, which is about the politics of the 1990s and Pat Buchanan and David Duke, how they prefigured Trump. But he's somebody who has been tracking these ideas and the way they are taking hold on the right and where they come from in our country very, very closely. So I wanted to hear what he thought now that they were breaking this far out into the open. As always, my email, EzraKleinShow@nytimes.com. John Gans, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's say that, blessedly, you've never heard of who Nick Fuentes is. Maybe you've just heard of him in the last few weeks.
Right.
Who is Nick Fuentes?
Nick Fuentes, I would say, is the most popular representative of neo-Nazism in America.
I knew it. I was literally about to say, let's see how many times they say the word neo-Nazi. Let's count. And I was literally going to say it and pause it before he said it, and he just said it. I was going to say, let's see how many. I should have predicted it. I knew it. I knew they were going to say that word, neo-Nazi. They love that word. Oh, Lord. Okay, let's hear his explanation for it.
Expand.
Well, by his own story, he comes from a middle-class background in the suburbs of Chicago. He became interested in political activism. He was a fervent Trump supporter. And then he ran afoul, according to him, of some gatekeepers in the conservative movement, namely Ben Shapiro, who accused him of anti-Semitism when he asked questions about U.S. policy towards Israel. And then over the years, he assembled a following of other disaffected young men. And he launched two campaigns that he called the Groyper Wars to basically pressure mainstream conservative figures to move rightward on issues to do with race, with LGBTQ issues, and with Israel, and the subtext being there, the Jewish question, Jews.
So he's not that subtext oriented compared to some people in this movement. I mean, he'll talk about an admiration for Adolf Hitler. He doesn't just talk about Israel. He talks about the Jews.
You know, we have to go a little bit further than to say something's up with the Zionists or Israel. It's not Israel. It is the Jews. And once again, remember who is responsible for it all: the Jews. They are responsible for every war in the world. It's not even debatable at this point. Hitler was a pedophile and kind of a pagan. It's like, well, he was also really fucking cool.
There's something...
I'll be honest, I'm kind of like, I'm at that point now where I'm basically impervious to these clips. I've seen these clips all over Twitter, and the reason why they play these clips is to serve as a pretext to basically, once again, assault someone's character without assaulting their ideas or pushing back on their ideas. They will not, I promise you, they'll call him a neo-Nazi, an anti-Semite, a Jew hater, all these kinds of names. Not once will they actually go into detail about the control that Jewish people have over our society. It's just true. I have brought this up on multiple occasions. Mark Dubowitz at the Foundation for Defending Democracies. If you look at any of the think tanks that write Middle Eastern foreign policy, half the people who work at them are Jewish. The executive directors, the senior fellows, the distinguished fellows, the senior vice president at YNEP, Washington Institute for Near East Policy. 5 out of the 8 Ivy League presidents are Jewish. UPenn has multiple facilities named after Jews. Steven Schwartzman, who is a billionaire Jew, who made his money in Wall Street, his name is on the medical facility at UPenn, where Trump graduated. Some of the biggest donors to all these Ivy League schools are Jewish. Leslie Wexner, he's like the biggest donor to Harvard. Ronald, God, what's the guy's name? Ronald something. Is it Schwartz? No, there's Steven Schwartzman. There's a bunch of these guys. Leslie Wexner, I haven't looked at him in a long time, but there's a whole bunch of them. I mean, Israel Englander, he's a Jew, and he is the CEO at Millennium Management, which is like the second or first biggest asset manager in the United States. They have like, what, $500 billion in market cap assets? It's crazy. Look at Bob Iger. Bob Iger is the CEO at Disney. He's Jewish. Sumner Redstone, CBS, he's Jewish. It's not even a conspiracy at this point. Jeffrey Epstein, he's clicked in with half the Jews in Israel. Half the Ministry of Defense in Israel is clicked in with Epstein. They're everywhere. They're all over the government. You can go all the way back to PNAC with Robert Kagan and Bill Kristol. You can go back to Irving Kristol and Norman Podhoretz, going all the way back to the 50s and 60s, the founders of the neoconservative movement. All these guys were Jews, every single one of them. It's not a conspiracy. It's 100% real. It's documented. And I'm just tired of people pretending like this isn't true. It's absolutely true. Miriam Adelson, Jew. Sheldon Adelson, Jew. AIPAC, run by Jews. The World Zionist Organization. The Republican Jewish Congress, or Conference, or whatever. I mean, they're everywhere. B'nai B'rith, Right Wing Watch, ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, all these people are Jews. They're in the media. They're in the federal government. They're in academia. They're at the think tanks and the 501c3s. Like, they're omnipresent in our society, and they control social media. They control our speech. They control finance. They control business. It's ridiculous, the amount of power that Jews have in our society. And let me be very specific. This is not me saying I have an issue with Jewish people per se. I don't. Like, they're completely fine. I could get along perfectly fine with a Jewish person. I don't think it's this big conspiracy where every Jew is in on it, but it's just undeniable. PragerU, Dennis Prager is a Jew. Ben Shapiro, he's a Jew. Andrew Klavan, a Jew. It's like, when does it end? Look at who the biggest donor to Claremont Institute is. It's Paul Singer, a billionaire Jew. And J.D. Vance is an alumni or an acolyte from the Claremont Institute. Look at who's running Palantir. Alex Karp, a Jew. He said his biggest fear was being defenestrated by Christian nationalists, which means to be thrown out of a window. Like, are we just gonna be gaslit by liberals into thinking that this isn't like a real thing when it's absolutely real? Jews run society. It's just true. They control speech. They control the media. And look, I want to be very specific. I hope that I don't get canceled for this on YouTube. God forbid. But it's just like, we're just stating the facts. This isn't hate speech. This isn't like I have a problem with Jews. I don't want them to be deported or anything like that. I'm literally just making an observation here. Jews are literally everywhere in our society, all over politics. Larry Ellison bought a majority stake in TikTok because the people on TikTok were too pro-Palestine. Larry Ellison is the second richest man, third richest man on earth. He's a Jew. He's the single biggest funder to the IDF, and he's an American atheist Jew. It's like the list goes on. Robert Kraft. I mean, it's like it doesn't end. It just keeps going like this, and this is just the surface of it. I'm only getting started here. And they're going to try to gaslight us into acting like this isn't real. The chief moderator at TikTok is a former IDF military intelligence soldier. Marissa Straight, the CEO at PragerU, was born in Los Angeles. She's a Jew. She went and fought in the IDF. A woman born in Los Angeles to a wealthy Jewish family moves to Israel at 18 to fight in the IDF. Then she comes back and she becomes the CEO of Prager University. Basically a Republican propaganda company run by Dennis Prager, a Jew, founded by Dennis Prager. And the CEO is a Jew who used to work in Unit 8200, which is the military intelligence unit in Israel. I have all my facts straight. I have all this memorized in my brain. And these people are going to tell us that there's nothing going on here. This is why nobody likes liberals. This is why nobody likes the left. They're not on the ball. We're on the ball. The right wing is on the ball. We see where this is headed. We see who's running society. And the liberals just want to talk about us being bad people for pointing out the obvious. This is a problem.
There are figures here who it feels like they try to keep a mask on.
Yeah.
And he doesn't.
He doesn't. And I think that's a key part of his appeal.
Exactly.
I think
Authentic.
that his viewers find that refreshing. They find it titillating. And they find it to be reflective of their politics.
You mentioned the Groypers.
Yeah.
What's a Groyper?
Well, let me tell you a story of how I learned what Groypers are. I was writing a piece for the New Republic about 5 years ago about the right. And I was learning about what were young people on the right like? What were they thinking about? How did they respond to Trump? And what was the future of conservative media and elites in the Trump era? In the course of this, I kind of befriended some young right-wing guys. And they kept on talking about Groypers. And I didn't really know what it was. And then I realized that they were kind of a subculture of online, of trolls and kind of marginal figures. And they had often as their avi or their avatar profile picture, this kind of grotesque toad that looked like Pepe the Frog. And it's my understanding that this subculture is larger than Nick Fuentes and not necessarily under his control or direction, but that he speaks for them. He attempts to speak for them and to unite them into a sort of political force.
But what do the Groypers believe? I mean, this is a very meme-heavy, online, trollish subculture that is endlessly dancing on the edge of, oh, aren't we just joking?
Yeah.
And so pinning it down can be a little bit like trying to pin smoke.
Right.
Because you focus in on a view, a meme, it's like, oh, you have no sense of humor.
Yeah.
But it's the classic, first you're making jokes about the gas chambers, then you're thinking about sending your enemies to them.
Yeah, I think it's a little difficult for people to understand because we're accustomed to thinking of, politics coming from ideas, coming from intellectuals, elites, media figures that disseminate ideas. And this kind of goes in the other direction. It bubbles up from message boards. It bubbles up from memes. jokes, ironic playfulness. But basically, the text, not the subtext of all of them, is kind of a constant barrage of propaganda that's anti-Semitic, racist, misogynistic, homophobic, you name it. And also a lot of content that is conspiratorial, obviously, that sees shadowy actors running the government, and is also deeply dissatisfied with the state of America and the prospects it has for people like them.
So you write this piece on, actually written a couple pieces on the Groyperification.
I mean, that's a typical liberal answer.
Other Republican Party.
Not much to say.
And you wrote, quote, "Here's the thing to understand.
I'm only going to respond when they start lying because I'm already 20 minutes into the video and I've paused it a lot. So I'm going to let them speak. I'll just respond when they start saying nonsense.
Single person under, say, the age of 40 on the right is exposed to extremely high levels of Groyper content every day in group chats, on their social media timelines, in Discord chats, etc. Groyperism totally suffuses the cultural environment of the right." And this point about the people under the age of 40, this idea that there is a pretty big difference in what the 20-somethings on the right are like and what the 50-somethings are like.
Sure.
I hear that from the right all the time.
Yeah.
So for people who do not have texture of that cultural environment, what are you describing? What are they seeing? What does that cultural environment look and feel like?
Well, I mean, just recently there were a couple of leaks about, and Political reported one of them about group chats, and basically, yeah, it's an environment where there's a lot of sharing of memes and jokes and repetition of memes and lots of joking about the Holocaust, joking about Hitler, joking about blacks and making jokes about slavery, and it's just a kind of anarchic indulgence of a very sadistic id that usually involves, the humiliation of minorities or women.
So a lot of the energy of this and a lot of the way it would get defended is that the right
very
in the,
anxious.
Late 2010s.
This guy over here is super anxious. I don't know what his deal is.
Early 2020s, its big enemy was the woke mob, cancel culture, the thought police, the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
And you would hear this described as joking, but a provocation about that. It is showing that you can say what the cultural enforcers don't want you to say.
Yeah.
Richard Hanania, the sort of dissident right figure and intellectual, describes it as like the based ritual where people on the MAGA right get together and keep upping the ante to show that they are not.
Okay, this I kind of agree with. There is this problem, and it is true that this is a problem with the Groypers, where, let's understand something. There's a kind of dialectic here that we need to analyze. Being base signaling and woke signaling, or being based and being woke, are basically two sides of the same coin. And let's be very specific about what I mean, because the word woke gets thrown around quite a bit. Woke, as I define it or as I see it, and I've spent ample time thinking about this, woke is basically the attempt to subvert or deracinate traditional views, traditional societal norms from the perspective of envy and absurdity. And let me be very specific about what that means, and let me give you guys an example. When we say deracinate, that means cut the roots. To deracinate or subvert traditional norms, traditional values. So take something like gender roles, okay? This is an example. Gender roles would be something like men are oppressive, they're, toxic masculinity, this idea of traditional gender roles as being something that oppresses women. And the idea here from somebody who's woke would be to say, men are just oppressing women through marriage, through, wanting them to have children, through wanting them to stay in long-term marriages, even when the relationship has burned out, the love has burned out. This is oppressive. This is men trying to control women's freedom. And what's funny about this is that when we talk about gender roles in the broader context, gender roles are the very bedrock by which civilizations exist. Without men, without gender roles, you don't have civilization. You don't have nations. The human species does not exist, cannot survive without gender roles. And we're seeing that breakdown right now. Because if women, let's just be real, men are suitable, men are designed to sit in a, you know, factory that's humid and dark and build missiles on the assembly line for 16 hours a day. Women are not built to do that. Men are built to go 800 feet up in the sky on a safety harness and put a window onto a skyscraper. Women are not equipped to do that. Men are equipped to get on the battlefield and carry an injured soldier half a mile back to the ditch. Women are not built to do that. Like, men are, by their very design, by their very nature, are more suitable for carrying out organized violence. They have a greater capacity for warfare. They're stronger. They're more resilient, physically resilient to the conditions in order to build society, in order to do construction. Women don't want to be on an oil rig for a year away from friends and family. A man can do that because they have different dispositions. But of course, women or people who are woke will say people who are woke will say that's toxic and for some odd reason, or this is a social construct, which is ridiculous. And so when we say woke is about subverting traditional values or subverting, I'll give you guys a better example, actually. Let's take beauty standards. A perfect example of woke in the context of beauty standards would be an overweight woman who feels envious that a woman who's skinnier, has a nicer body, is more attractive than she is, who fits the conventional standards of beauty. The woman who's overweight, who envies that woman's beauty, will come to this absurd conclusion that society needs to remove all its norms, remove its traditional views on beauty, so that she is recognized as being just as beautiful as a conventionally attractive woman. So it comes from a place of envy, and the absurd belief is that society needs to change for her, not that she needs to lose weight. That's what wokeism is. And it's about basically sandblasting and removing all these old traditional views on beauty. That's wokeism in a nutshell. Based, on the other hand, is doing the same thing, but violating every social norm, not calling people the N-word, not calling women the B word to their face or calling them fat. It's like being overly transgressive in a way that violates social norms. So both are about violating social norms, just for different reasons. One comes from a place of bitterness and resentment. The other one comes from a place of envy. But they're basically two sides of the same coin. I don't like either. I think both are terrible for culture. Wokeism and trying to be based all the time, I think they're both horrible for mainstream culture. We just need to pull somewhere closer to the center. That's my take on that. So I kind of agree with what they're saying here.
Not part of the establishment. They're part of this counter-revolutionary force. How do you think about the interplay between whatever that was? Because I take it as there was a sort of culture that emerged in response to censoriousness, and then the movement into actual belief.
Well, yeah, I think that was a way that people could justify to themselves what they were seeing on an everyday level. And some people could say to themselves and to others that basically they were participating in a cultural revolt against this censorious state of affairs, that and that was their interest, which was to tear down those norms.
Well, nobody wants to have their conscience policed 24/7. Nobody wants to get harassed for speaking up in a college lecture because they disagree with what the professor said about a particular subject and then get called Nazi or fascist by the entire class. Like, we don't want to live in that society. Sorry.
And to open a space of freedom. Freedom to do what is the question? Is it just to, say and do racist things? I don't know. So I think it created a structure in which, those ideas spread rapidly. It's even to call them ideas is wrong. These memes really spread rapidly and made it so people who may have been uncomfortable with it or may have found it at variance with the way they were raised to kind of look the other way and say, we are in a sense playing around.
And the first thing that does, it seems to me, is you're breaking down an immune system that people have.
Yeah.
And you can't extricate this, in my view, from Trump.
No.
If you have any hint left of that attachment to old norms and mores and courtesies,
Yeah.
well, then you can't be a true Trumpist because he doesn't attach to any of that.
Yeah.
And so you begin demonstrating a cultural affinity to that kind of politics of provocation and politics of no rules. Once you've done that, then you actually don't have that immune system anymore. You're breaking down the immune system that was supposed to protect against people like Donald Trump himself.
Absolutely. I think your point about Trump being the originator of this.
I will give Ezra credit. His analogies are really good. That's why I say for a liberal, Ezra's not too bad. He's a decent liberal. I like his analogies here with the immune system thing. He's pretty on the money here.
Is important. When Trump appears, and people seem to forget this for some reason, in 2016, 15, there was a lot of talk about the alt-right, a term that's not used very much anymore. But these people, who had previously been on the fringes of American politics, greeted the arrival of Trump, basically with rapture.
Yeah, ecstatically.
Ecstatically. And they knew that this was their kind of guy. They knew that the things that he said would open a space for them. If he wasn't precisely a perfect vehicle for their politics, it was a real big breakthrough. So you have, these people crawling out of the woodwork. You have Richard Spencer. You have the Charlottesville riots. And then there is kind of a backlash. And
so let's be very clear here, because they're making a big conflation here. We talk about the alt-right, people like Richard Spencer, all the other people who were associated with him, the Rise Above movement, the people who did the killing at Charlottesville, and then America First. These are fundamentally distinct. Okay, one is an American nationalist movement that seeks to put Americans first, that seeks to weed out corruption. It's a populist movement. We want our sovereignty back from Israel. We don't want to have an anti-white country, which is obvious. We don't want to be a racist country, but we have swung a little bit too far in the other direction. I think anti-whiteism has kind of become a little bit too normalized, which is a horrible and poisonous force. It's bad. It's an acid to the social bonds. We don't want to have an anti-white country. We don't want mass migration. We want sovereignty. We're an American nationalist movement. We emphasize our common Americanness. We don't want mass migration. We want to get down the cost of living. We want to give people in Gen Z and millennials a future that they can be excited about. We want to bring back jobs, and we want industrial policy. That's it. And we want corruption out of the government. And we don't want everybody on Capitol Hill to be taking money from AIPAC, the NRA, Chamber of Commerce, Wall Street. That's it. It's not like that complicated. The alt-right was like an ethno-nationalist, like a pure ethno-nationalist movement. This is why I don't respect Richard Spencer. I actually despise Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer became a liberal. And Richard Spencer said he likes abortion because it kills more black people than white people. Kills more black babies than white babies. That kind of race idolatry is gross. It's disgusting. Anybody who thinks like that can just go kick rocks. We're not about that. So we need to make a clear distinction there, because trying to conflate these two things, it was birthed out of that, but it's not really the same thing at all, actually.
Those people seem to sort of get pushed out. There's not that much talk about alt-nationalism, the alt-right anymore. And Trump also doesn't really seem to be adopting some of their preferences in foreign policy, and also not, he makes some very tasteless remarks about Jews, but not an ideological anti-Semitism that they would want him to do. So this thing kind of goes on the back burner, but it's very much suffusing the culture of young right-wingers who are not, they're in the intermediate and lower ranks of the various, bureaucracies, the various staffs of conservative institutions. And yeah, it never really fully goes away.
But then something else happens, which is that as weak as the gatekeepers are in this modern era, there are still people with keys to various gates. Yeah. And by the end of Trump's first term, Trump is banned on most of the major social media platforms. Right. Certainly a lot of these figures are banned on them. And as Trump makes his return, and then very specific...
That's another problem. Liberals want to ban everybody. Liberals want to ban and deplatform everybody. When Trump got banned, Babylon Bee got banned on Twitter, when Jordan Peterson got banned on Twitter, the left rejoiced. They thought it was a good thing. They thought it was a positive development. This is the problem. They're anti-free speech. So, another check for the liberals.
Specifically, when Elon Musk buys Twitter,
Sure.
renames it X, takes off functionally all of the guardrails, then the ability of all this to flood into the conservative nervous system really changes. I want you to watch a clip from
Sure.
Tucker Carlson here that I think is interesting.
Unfortunately for the guardians of the old system, the old Republican Party, people have been allowed to describe it accurately, mostly because Elon Musk opened up X. And, when he did that, you get all kinds of filth and nonsense and lies, but you also get some truth, actually quite a bit of truth. And one of the main things that people are telling the truth about that they didn't tell the truth about before is that our foreign policy really doesn't have much to do with what's good for the United States. And once those words have been uttered, they can't be taken back.
Yeah.
So Carlson here is talking about Israel. I would say maybe he's not entirely talking about Israel, but that dynamic he's describing, that Musk taking over X is a hinge point, seems true to me. Does it track for you?
Absolutely. I mean, all of these figures reemerge when they had been pushed out, and they create a media ecosystem that is suffused with these ideas. So, first of all, yeah, there is a lot of people online are looking for information. They're looking to understand an extremely complicated world. They encounter, and they have a sense that perhaps the establishment views are either misinforming them or are just flat out boring. And then they discover, a narrative about things that's more appealing.
I mean, the establishment tried to tell us that men and women are the same. They tried to tell us that trans women competing in biological real women's sports is completely normal, and that we have to basically, change the way that we do traditional sports in America because it's discriminatory. It's like, this is what they're trying to do. It is subversive. The left has tried to normalize so many ridiculous things, and they've lied about various things. So of course we don't trust these people. Like, obviously. Who trusts the mainstream media? Are you kidding me?
Simplifying seems persuasive.
Exciting.
And also, it cannot be discounted that Nick Fuentes in particular is extremely entertaining. And they, gravitate towards these crackpot ideas. Look, the United States, its support of...
See, that's what they do. They call it crackpot. There's nothing crackpot about wanting sovereignty for your own country and wanting to be able to provide a future for your children and your countrymen. Like, I don't see why is that crackpot?
Israel is a perfectly legitimate topic to dispute and to have differing views about and to criticize. And more people are coming around to that position. They saw what was happening in Gaza and they were deeply upset by it. And they look for commentary and opinion on that, right? And the commentary and opinion on that they get is not, what the New York Times is saying or what the New Yorker is saying or even, left-wing outlets like The Nation or something like that. They get Nick Fuentes, they get Candace Owens, they get all these kind of crackpot views about it, which take that discussion about real-world issues and a mixture of...
By crackpot, what he's saying is people who are getting to the bottom of it and people who are saying the things that nobody else will say. That's what he means by crackpot. People who are saying the unfiltered truth.
Rational discussion and, commentary that's actually somewhat sophisticated, I would say, in Fuentes' case. And then channel that into propaganda for anti-Semitism. And I think it's important to realize, again, back to your question about ideas and the diffusion of ideas, that, not everyone is aware that they're being propagandized, right? They are in an information environment where this is what they see and it becomes normal, right? And in a sense, they get captured. They are in, people love to talk about the liberal bubble, liberal elite bubble. There is an equivalent bubble of the hard right. So that brings this kind of deformed version of the public sphere that Musk allowed to happen, and I think one could argue intentionally.
I want to get at a bit of backstory here before we get into the Tucker Carlson Nick Fuentes interview, because this is not the first time Nick Fuentes has broken through to the mainstream of conservatism.
Yeah.
There's a very famous dinner at Mar-a-Lago, I believe,
right,
where Donald Trump is dining with Kanye West,
Yeah.
noted anti-Semite, and Kanye brings Nick Fuentes.
sure,
At the time, Trump looks like the past of the party. People think, he's like on his way out. It's going to be Ron DeSantis in 2024 or someone like that.
yeah,
And I think they also buy the idea, which Trump says afterwards, and I take as even plausible, that he doesn't really know who Nick Fuentes is. I think people buy with Trump that he talks to a lot of people. And one reason I think this is breaking through in the way it is twofold. You don't have any of that deniability on Carlson's side.
right.
And now everybody understands that the future of Trumpism is up for grabs. How would you describe the role Tucker Carlson plays on the right now?
I think that he strives to be a person of great influence in directing the policy, staffing, messaging of the Republican Party. And to a certain extent, he is. He has deep ties to people in the administration.
Helped get J.D. Vance named vice president.
Absolutely. And, he's a figure. I would say it is more helpful to interpret him as a politician.
I agree with this.
Yeah. I think that he basically understood the direction of the Republican Party and remade his entire image and self to fit in with it. And he has been very smart about that. And he realized, the old institutions ain't what they used to be. Does it really matter that he's on Fox anymore? Apparently not very much. So his creation of a new persona really is the story of the transformation of the Republican Party.
So at this point, how would you describe what Tucker Carlson's politics are? Like what pole of right-wing ideology does he seem to hew to and represent?
He represents a tradition that's sometimes called isolationist, which views America's entanglement with foreign alliances and interventions in other countries to not necessarily be in our interest. Not necessarily dovish, but definitely the United States should apply force when it wants, when it needs to, in its own very direct self-interest.
I mean, yeah, that's just like obvious. That's like a common sense point. I don't get why that's bad. So far, most of what they're saying is tracking pretty accurately. As far as Tucker Carlson operating more as like a liaison between the next generation or the next era, the new era of conservatism, and actually being clicked in with the establishment. So he's in a very important and consequential position. That's absolutely true. But he's trying to get our country back on track. He's trying to set our country straight, actually, which is why people like Tucker Carlson. He's not going to do this whole beating around the bush thing where we pretend like everything in this country is normal. Everything in this country is fine. You look at the job report, GDP line goes up. No, Tucker Carlson understands that the quality of life in this country has gone down drastically in the past 40, 50 years. And he understands that the overall culture, the overall cohesion of this country, it's getting worse. It's becoming more divided. It's becoming more polarized. And he understands that we are mortgaging our future to defend other people's interests, other countries' interests. He understands that acutely. So, I like Tucker Carlson. That's just me, though.
I believe that he calls himself a Christian. I believe represents a Christian nationalism, which is non-Zionist or anti-Zionist. Again, there are some roots in that and the old right that goes back for the pre-war. He is very hostile to immigration. He seems to have a very strong sense of white ethnic identity and believes that, it's a problem for the country if there are too many non-white immigrants.
Forgive me if I'm
Well, see, it's always with the framing. Like Tucker Carlson has made it very clear on several occasions that he is, and look, I hate that I even have to come up here and defend all these people because I have my disagreements with Tucker, I have my disagreements with Nick. But when we're talking about people like Ezra Klein and all these other liberals, I know I got to pick a side and I know what side I'm on. I know who I agree with more, and it's not them. And they're trying to demonize having some form of ethnic identity, which is not bad in and of itself. It's bad when it becomes tribal. It's bad when it becomes collectivist and you seek to use that as a pretext to dominate other groups. But what he's basically saying is there was a Anglo-Saxon Protestant identity that forged a path for the United States of America, and that's something worth preserving, which is actually logical. It's completely rational, actually. That's a wise thing. That's a prudent position to have. And, you know, he's more hostile towards immigration than I am. I'm not like super anti-immigration. I just think we've had a lot of immigration here in the past 60 years. We've brought in, 100 million people, which is a lot, many of whom hate the country, as evidenced by what happened at UC Berkeley last week. So, or was it this week? I think it might have been this week. But no, there's nothing wrong with the position that he has. He's just saying the United States should remain majority white, which is something I agree with. And we should slow down immigration. Like, why is that hostile? I don't understand the framing here. And it's just the way they characterize and frame everything. Like it's I don't know. I don't get it. We have to set things straight.
Remembering this,
Yeah.
didn't you do an interview with like the son of a Ku Klux Klan member?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you brought that up. So I was working on a piece in 2020 about the conservative movement, and Tucker was a big part of it, and his kind of transformation into a populist, into a right-wing populist. And I got a remarkable quote from someone who was the child of Don Black, a Ku Klux Klan leader and a big figure in the white nationalist movement. The person I got the quote from, just to be clear, left the movement and was highly critical of it. But here's what they told me. From the perspective of my family, Tucker's making the same points they've been trying to make their entire lives, but much better. He's found a wider audience and the ideal method of expression for many of the same ideas. My father's a little baffled still that it's Tucker Carlson, sometimes someone who he always never liked because he saw him as a shill for the Bush administration and the Iraq War, that's bringing white nationalist ideas to the Fox audience. I got this quote. I'm not a very experienced journalist at the time. This is the beginning of my
I just feel like that's weird to frame. Maybe there's some subliminal messaging from Tucker about white nationalism. I don't know. I'd have to do more investigating on that. If there is, and I disagree with Tucker on those things because I'm not a white nationalist. I actually have a core ideological difference with white nationalists. I emphasize citizenship. I emphasize common Americanness, and I agree that demographics are important. But I'm not like a white nationalist, and actually disagree with white nationalists vehemently. White nationalists believe that white people should, by virtue of being white, have more of a say or authority over the destiny of this country at the exclusion of non-whites. They want to have uniform control over the federal government, over the media, over culture, over politics, over academia, over the institutions. And that's something I reject. I only care about putting Americans first, putting this country first. And if there are non-white people who are capable of doing that, we should let those people have control. We should let those people have power and exercise influence if it's going to wield positive outcomes for all of us. That's my position. To me, it's not like a racialist thing. And with Tucker, he has emphasized that he is an individualist. He has emphasized that Western civilization is based on individualist ideas, which are rooted in the Christian tradition, which are rooted in Christian theology, and the belief that every individual is made in God's image. And because they are made in God's image, they have individual worth. And because we as individuals are moral agents created by God, we should be judged on an individual basis, not on a group basis. And because when we die, we will be judged by God as an individual, not as a group, our society should reflect that belief. That is what Tucker has said multiple times. He said that last week on his appearance with Megyn Kelly. So I don't know where he's getting this from, but there's obviously different ways to interpret the things that people say.
I got this quote, and I brought this to my other sources for the story, who are young people on the right. And I thought I had something dispositive. I thought I had something that showed Tucker Carlson's playing around with things that you really shouldn't.
What's the example? Give us an example, and then we can dispute it. I'm waiting for you to give an example.
That he's moving in a very disturbing direction. They shrugged.
What's the example?
They didn't care. And I found that to be shocking and disturbing. And I think that anecdote says a lot.
I also think, and I think this is very important to understanding Tucker and the role he plays, is he understands something Trump understands, but not everybody does, which is the modern right, even more than the modern left, is driven by attention.
Yeah.
Trump has remade it around an attentional economy.
Sure.
And there isn't somebody behind Trump as good at attention as Trump is. J.D. Vance certainly isn't.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be the president to be the leader of MAGA. That it is very plausible to me that you would have a J.D. Vance nomination, but actually the next leader of MAGA is Tucker Carlson. That I think what Tucker Carlson is trying to be is the authentic voice of MAGA, who, because he doesn't have to do all the political coalition work,
right,
he can be purer than someone like J.D. Vance, who I think fundamentally agrees with Carlson at this point.
Yeah.
But has to maintain, or attempt to maintain, viability.
See, like they're gesturing at a point, but they're not actually crystallizing what the point is. They're talking in these vague terms. Can you tell us what J.D. Vance believes? Can you tell us how J.D. Vance agrees with Tucker Carlson? Or are you just going to gesture at this idea that, like, it's just a given that they agree with each other? Can you be specific? Where's the specificity here? This is my problem. Like, it's just like, this is what liberals do. It's like faux intellectualism. Like, give us something. Give us some substance.
Again.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing. I think Carlson views himself in that role for sure. Tucker Carlson was sort of the median, I would say, not exact conservative Republican to a certain degree. Kind of towed the party line on most issues, Iraq, all this kind of stuff. American foreign policy.
He was on MSNBC.
He was on MSNBC. He was also tried to present himself as a kind of reasonable conservative.
He was like a good time, libertarian rich kid.
Yeah, there's that too. And it's interesting, he takes that bow tie off.
Yeah.
There's a degree that there's costume changes here, He takes the bow tie off. He now has this more folksy look, checked shirts and so on and so forth in this cabin, et cetera, et cetera. He's cultivating an image of himself as down to earth and folksy and not part of the establishment. And it's hard to take when you realize
I think that's obvious. I think that is undisputably true. I think imaging for a lot of people conveys something on a, what's the word I'm looking for, subconscious level, where it kind of communicates a degree of authenticity, even if it is performative, even if it's just an aesthetic change rather than an actual internal change. That I think is absolutely true. There is something to that for sure.
Product of it. And then, but there's something important to understand.
And a lot of people have brought that up in all fairness. Like, why has Tucker Carlson changed so many times throughout his career? Country club Republican, calling Pat Buchanan an anti-Semite. Then he becomes a George Bush Iraq war defender, then a populist at Fox News. Now he's, hanging out in Maine in this log cabin, and he's wearing checkered shirts and going fly fishing. I don't know. It's just, it is a bit odd.
And about Tucker Carlson's turn, I think, to anti-Semitism in particular, right? I believe that, anti-Semitism functions as an epoxy for elites that don't really want social changes that would affect their prominence, and in fact want to shore up their prominence, and need mass support and need a target and need a story about economic dispossession, a world that doesn't seem to make sense, that serves their interests. You see this in a lot of...
But let's be specific. What is the anti-Semitism? That's the problem. That it's, once again, it's categorical weaponization. It's linguistic spellcasting. Let's throw a term at somebody and dismiss him. Like, what did he say that's anti-Semitic? That I'm trying to parse that out, because for me, let's define what anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism is not criticizing Jewish culture. Anti-Semitism is not criticizing Israel. That's not anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is making conclusions about a Jewish person's character solely based on the fact that they're a Jew. That's anti-Semitism. I can't think of a single time when Tucker Carlson has done that. Nick Fuentes probably has. In fact, I'm sure he has. But Tucker Carlson has not done that. And in fact, Tucker Carlson has consistently said on multiple occasions that we need to de-racialize the conversation about Israel. So I'm really confused here. Like, I feel like they're grasping at straws or coming up making these conclusions without having any real evidence. What has he said that's fundamentally anti-Semitic in the way I defined it? Where you're judging a Jewish person, making conclusions about their character or their beliefs simply based on their identity as a Jew. I don't think he's done that. So I don't get the point they're making here.
Different places. You see it in Russia. You know, the Tsarist regime kind of invented anti-Semitism for this purpose. The protocols of Elders of Zion are created in this regime that's feeling the pressure of a mass population that's becoming dissatisfied with it, creates anti-Semitism, you know, as a way to rechannel that energy. You see this in France, where you have an aristocracy and a clergy that is kind of pushed into old institutions, sees its prominence in the society losing out. It's sort of losing its world. And then it needs to find a mass politics, a way to attack its enemies. And anti-Semitism becomes very useful for that. So anti-Semitism always works to create a kind of coalition. There's a street gutter crackpot anti-Semitism. And then you have what you could call more respectable anti-Semites. Let's say Charles Lindbergh, right? A person who was highly respected, a respectable person, you know, a great hero to many Americans, but found had a racial view of the world and found anti-Semitic ideas persuasive.
Henry Ford.
So you had these respectable anti-Semites and crackpot anti-Semites, and they're coming together, I would say, is the creation of an actual anti-Semitic politics, right? And this interview between Fuentes and Carlson is this almost textbook. You have the anti-Semitism of the gutter, Fuentes, and you have the anti-Semitism of a declining aristocracy, right? Tucker is this kind of comes from this preppy background. Father was an ambassador, stepmother's, Swanson, and, sees an America that's not the way he wants it to be, that's declining, that doesn't look the way he looks like, that has norms that he doesn't share. And you have Fuentes, who comes from, he didn't go to college. He dropped out of college. He comes from a modest background. He is dripping with resentment to a world that he feels doesn't have a place for him.
A self-described proud incel.
Yeah. And also very interesting that he does not try to hide it or pretend that he is not, socially maladjusted in some way. And that lends him authenticity and makes people gravitate towards it. So yeah, that is the most perfect, in that interview, in that moment, the most perfect encapsulation of anti-Semitic politics.
That's actually an interesting point. I'll be good faith about that. I think that's actually an interesting point. The kind of dialectic here between Fuentes and Tucker Carlson kind of having similar feelings about the country. You have a declining aristocrat in Tucker Carlson who feels like the quality of the country, the cultural output of the country has worsened. And you have somebody like Nick Fuentes, who is a disgruntled middle American who comes from a modest background, who feels like the country's too feminine, who feels like it's too gay, it's lost its way, it's becoming immoral, too decadent. He's a disaffected young white man who feels like the country does not respect white men as much as, or actually disrespects and walks over white men in a way that it didn't, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So they're coming from a kind of similar place, just different starting points from where they came in society, different backgrounds. And this is an interesting thing. I do think on some level, what he's saying is accurate, like anti-Semitism kind of being weaponized historically. I mean, this is obviously true. If you look at Hitler's Germany, this was the whole thing, right? The country is worsening. It's becoming too decadent, too liberal, too, what's the word I'm looking for? Too libertine. There's no moral order. There's no morality. It's very degenerate. And the people who are doing it, who are orchestrating it, are Jews. That kind of rhetoric is bad. I think that's bad rhetoric. I think that kind of anti-Semitism is, that's where I draw the line. I don't think that's appropriate or healthy for society at all. I think it's very destructive, actually. But I think there is a difference between saying there is something here about Jewish people who are working in tandem and concert with one another to achieve their own interests and are helping a foreign government achieve its own interests using resources that they acquire here in a way that nobody else does. They're putting another country first. I think that's a fair criticism. It's an accurate criticism. It does come with all these racialized elements, which I don't think is healthy. And we need to find a way to separate those two things and purge the latter part of that, because it does embolden the wrong people. And that's bad. We can't have that if we're going to have a civil, healthy society with courtesy and manners and all those kinds of things. It can't just be this barbaric, angry, resentful, bitter anti-Semitism. But we have to be able to call things as we see it, and we have to be able to identify the truth. And this is just true. We can't live in a society in which Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, Josh Hammer can say Europeans have anti-Semitism in their DNA and get away with it, and nobody bats an eye at that comment when it's like obviously a horrible thing to say. But then on the other hand, when people call out Jews for obviously having a disproportionate level of influence in our society and using that influence to help a foreign country at the expense of our own, we should be able to say that that's wrong without it being like this big anti-Semitic conspiracy. I don't know. But I'm trying to parse this out because I don't know how you parse the two. Anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Aristocracy, held down, dissatisfied kind of mob.
Like I don't think Tucker Carlson is like a true anti-Semite. Like I don't think he is. He doesn't strike me as like being mad at Jews. He doesn't strike me as having that outlook. So I don't know.
Bringing them together and you have a kind of coalition itself.
Let's get into that interview. I want to play a clip for you that almost felt to me like the heart of it.
Israel is unlike every other country in the sense that because the Jewish people are in a diaspora all over the world, there are significant numbers of Jews in Europe, but also in the United States. And because of their unique heritage and story, which is that they're a stateless people, they're unassimilable, they resist assimilation for thousands of years. And I think that's a good thing. And I guess what I'm saying is that if you are a Jewish person in America, you're sort of, and again, it's not because they're born, but it's sort of a rational self-interest politically to say, I'm a minority. I'm a religious, ethnic minority. This is not really my home. My ancestral home is in Israel. There's like a natural affinity that Jews have for Israel. And I would say on top of that, for the international Jewish community, is that they have this international community across borders, extremely organized, that is putting the interests of themselves before the interests of their home country. And there's no other country that has a similar arrangement like that. No other country has a strong identity like that, this religious blood and soil conviction, this history of being in the diaspora, stateless, wandering, persecuted, and in particular, the historic animosity between the Jewish people and the Europeans. They hate the Romans because the Romans destroyed the temple. That's why Eric Weinstein goes to the Arch of Titus and gives it the finger and takes a picture. We don't think like that as Americans and white people. We don't think about the Roman Empire in 2,000 years ago. They do. And so I guess that's really, and I don't think that's me saying the Jews. I don't think that's me being hateful. I don't think that's me being collectivist. I think that's understanding that identity.
Well, it is by definition collectivist, but
politics, whether you love it or hate it.
Because not every individual Jew thinks that way.
Whatever you feel about it, it's a reality that we live in a world of Jews and Christians, of whites and blacks. These identities mean something to us and they mean things to each other. And we can't sort of wish.
Yeah, I don't know why he just asserts that because that's not actually true. I don't know why he does have a tendency to think in like these collectivist group terms, which is one of my biggest disagreements with Fuentes. Like, not everybody thinks, oh, I'm black, I have to be pro-black. I'm white, I have to be pro-white. I'm a Jew, I have to be pro-Jew. Or I have to tailor my politics around my blackness or my racial identity. Not everybody thinks that way. A lot of people don't. But he thinks that way, so he projects that onto other people. That's one of my biggest problems with Fuentes.
Them away. And it feels like white people and Christians are the only ones that do that.
There's no question about that, your last point, for sure. one of
See,
the
like, that's just not true. Like, I don't know why Tucker Carlson didn't push back on that. Like, only white people and Christians don't think in terms of groups. That's not true. For a long time they have, and to this day they still do. Now, and this idea that like every black person, every Hispanic person, every Jewish person, every non-white person, every minority thinks in terms of their own group, their own race, their own, like, that's not true. Like, a lot of people think what is good for the country who are not white, myself included. A lot of people think what is good for society, what is, universal health care, affordable housing. Like, people care about those things, even if it doesn't create a relative gain for their own group at the exclusion of others, but it creates an absolute gain for the entire society. I don't know why people just make this assertion as if it's true or as if it's gospel when it's not.
reasons they do that is because they've been taught to hate themselves, of course, since the Second World War.
It's just an assumption that white people on the right in my generation have, because the left has built this entire coalition around minority identity politics, which has created this impression that every minority thinks in these kinds of group terms and sees themselves as existing only in relation to this white hegemonic Christian culture, which on some level is true, but there's a lot more nuance to it than that as well. People's individual politics are more layered than just that. But
all right, that's what you might call a rich text.
Yeah, sure.
How do you read it?
Well, I mean, he's an extremely talented rhetorician and communicator, and he does a few things. He presents a vocabulary that does not sound shocking to people, that uses words and terminology that wouldn't frighten people, that sounds like a rational discussion of politics, a rational comment on politics. And then weaved into this is all of the material of classic anti-Semitism. The Jews are an unassimilable group, self-interested, internationally organized very tightly and all talking to each other and kind of working as one mind, who don't have the interests of their host, at heart, have their own interests at heart, and are animated.
I think when he said Jews are unassimilable, I don't like that terminology, because Nick is a Christian, he's a Catholic. If you go all the way back to the Roman Empire, the Hasmonean dynasty, when they were brought into the Roman Empire, who were Jewish, when Pompey conquered Judea and he brought them into the Roman Empire, they betrayed Pompey and supported Caesar in the Roman Civil War after Pompey brought Jews, the Hasmonean dynasty, into the Roman Empire. And they did this on multiple occasions. There was multiple rebellions throughout the duration of the Roman Empire when the Jews were in Rome. You had James, who was Jesus' cousin, who believed that the gospel, which was introduced by Christ, who was James's cousin, Jesus Christ, was only for the Jews. You had the Jews who, when Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea, who were advocating that Jesus be crucified for claiming he was the king of the Jews, and the Jews claimed he was a blasphemer. Pontius Pilate actually initially did not want to crucify Jesus, and he said on multiple occasions, I find no fault in him, but the Jews pressured him anyways, and because Pontius Pilate didn't want unrest to take over Judea, which is where he was governing, he crucified Jesus under pressure. And so I know Nick has like this very religious worldview, this very ideologically religious worldview, which is something I don't like either, because it shuts down critical thinking. So this idea, this notion that like Jews are unassimilable, for him goes all the way back to the Roman Empire, which I think is crazy. I live in Los Angeles. There's plenty of Jews here who are regular, everyday Jews who run their errands, work their jobs. They're not thinking about Israel or this international global conspiracy. So I think he overdoes it with the emphasis on that. We're talking about very specific groups here, of very powerful and politically engaged Jews. We're not, the way he talks about it, he does make it seem as if like every Jew has this like consciousness, like this historical consciousness, this like super fervent Jewish identity, like this zealous identity about being super hardcore Zionist, and that's just false. It's not real.
By a deep
that is false. There's a small minority of Jews who do have that, who are very politically influential, But yeah, the way he sells it, he needs to be more precise, in my opinion.
Hostility to the people that surround them, to the societies they find themselves, hatred towards Christians, towards white people, so on and so forth. That is classic anti-Semitism. But
Yeah.
he keeps on saying things like, and that's a good thing, or something like that, or it's not really, I'm not trying to be hateful. He presents it as if he's having a discussion of politics like any other.
And the other move in there,
yeah,
in addition to the Jews are obsessed with the Romans, which I have to say, I don't feel very obsessed by the Romans.
I kind of like the Romans. Yeah.
Same. I love the Roman Empire. We should be the new Rome. I love Rome. I love to read about Rome. Marcus Aurelius, Augustus, the Tetrarch, Diocletian. Diocletian did a lot of bad things, but he did a lot of good things too. He reformed, he rebuffed his enemies, he reformed the administration. He was a pretty cool guy. Constantine, my favorite Roman emperor, who fought Licinius and won in the battle against the Eastern Roman Empire. Caligula, Nero, Valerian, very interesting people. Decius, Domitian, all very interesting people in the Roman Empire. So I love the Roman Empire, actually. I'm very pro-Roman Empire. They did some bad things. They were very brutal. Okay, we're not going to say that they weren't brutal. But in terms of having a cool civilization, one of the coolest in history, I mean, Rome has that down pat. Let's just be real. Rome's pretty cool.
But the other move in there, which you see a lot on the right, and a lot on the white identity, right? Let's call it.
Yeah.
Is, look, the Jews are just practicing their identity politics.
Right.
Don't we just have to practice ours?
Yeah.
And that final move,
yeah,
which is the one where Tucker says, well, there's no doubt about that. We white Europeans, the heritage Americans, we're taught to hate ourselves. There's been no rational self-interest since World War II.
Right.
That is, I think, a very fundamental move of Trump.
Which is just not true, if you know history. All the white Southerners, even William F. Buckley, and then he later revised his position on the Civil Rights Act, all of them thought that it would be bad for society. It would disrupt the moral order, this kind of white Christian culture that had existed in the United States for so long. And Lyndon B. Johnson knew he was going to lose the South for an entire generation when he passed the Civil Rights Act because of all the white people he was going to piss off. They were practicing what was in their own self-interest when they didn't want to desegregate the schools. So this idea that, like, white Christians don't have like this conceptualization of their own religious or racial identity too, it's just a lie.
That's
they just say that as a pretext to push the needle. It's just not true.
Bridge.
Yeah.
Of anti-Semitism to Trumpism.
Right.
This MAGA right has spent years saying, look, the whole left plays identity politics. It's time for white people to stand up for themselves. You're getting all this anti-white racism.
Yeah.
And here it is, right? The Jews are the danger to that. If they're going to practice their politics, you have to practice yours.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, look, at the core of the Nazi ideology is a social Darwinistic view of the world divided into almost different species of being who are engaged in an endless war with each other. And the Jews are a particularly important part of that worldview. They are the most threatening of these beings. And trying to launder what is a kind of biological essentialism about the nature of the political through, normal interest group politics, of course. In America, we have coalitions, we have representatives of different ethnic groups who advocate on each other's behalf. Well, there's a congressional black caucus. What's wrong with that? Why shouldn't white people do that? It is a different kind of politics. It's not just like, they should be able to practice their own identity politics and they can kind of be integrated through the political process and their interests are taken care of and balanced with other people's interests. No. The idea is that this group is impossible to assimilate. And also, national unity, the success of the nation, its health, is impossible to accomplish without their expulsion. This is the view. And this is the view that Fuentes continually hammers on.
There is a lot here that's tricky to talk about because...
I don't know if Fuentes would even agree that their expulsion is necessary. What I will say about Fuentes, though, is what bothers me about him what bothers me about Nick in particular is he doesn't seem necessarily like the type of person who would openly say we need to banish Jews from politics, but he does seem like the type of person who would support that, who would support a candidate who did move in that direction. He would kind of co-sign it or turn a blind eye to it or even openly cheer it on if he wouldn't do it himself. So this is the kind of thing that you have to be weary of. It's like there are certain people who they might not openly say, hey, we should denaturalize all non-whites and deport them out of America. This is the people who are white nationalists, white identitarians. There's a lot of people in that movement who agree with that. Keith Woods being one of them. He believes that they need to start denaturalizing en masse legal citizens in the UK who are Muslim and deport them back to the Middle East. You know, Nick Fuentes might not advocate that to be done to Jews here in America, but do you think he would take umbrage with it if somebody were to table that idea? I don't think he would. I think he would tacitly or quietly support it, which is kind of my idea. This is why people need moral clarity and why people need principles and guardrails on what they're willing and not willing to allow. Like he has said, he doesn't want Jews to be billionaires in society. My thing is, if you have somebody like Paul Wolfowitz who goes to Cornell, works his way up through the federal government, gets an important job in the NSC or in the Department of Defense, or becomes Deputy Secretary of State through legitimate meritocratic means, if a person like that happens to succeed or rise in society, then they should be granted with the same access to opportunity to wealth that everybody else has, regardless of their identity. I don't like this idea of like we should just openly discriminate against people who are of a different ethnic or racial group. I think that leads to very horrible outcomes. It's a very cannibalistic worldview. So, and the reason why it's cannibalistic is because it doesn't just end with ethnic minorities. It ends with people who are unintelligent, people who are poor, people who are unattractive, people who are disabled, people who are mentally handicapped. And it kind of leads to this idea of like we have to engage in this never-ending process of purifying the country in order to reach this mythical ideal, which is always leads to bad outcomes when you try to perfect a particular society by removing people who you consider imperfect. That goalpost is always shifting.
You're at this endless morass of the intersection of anti-Semitism and Israel.
Sure.
One move I'm seeing from a lot of people on the right at the moment is why should we be talking about what this, Rumble influencer thinks about the Jews when the left is electing Zoran Mamdani, right? When there's been these years of debate about anti-Semitism on the left. I'll say this super clearly. I've met Zoran Mamdani, voted for Zoran Mamdani. I don't think there's anything anti-Semitic about him at all. But I think you see in the way he has been treated, and then also what is happening on the right, a distinction that is worth understanding, a structural distinction. That anti-Zionism on the left often pushes towards what I would call liberalism, a belief that all people should have equal rights, that there should be universalism. There's a different version of it if you're more sort of socialist and Marxist.
Right.
But the left tends to push towards a universal.
Yeah, I have a more universalist worldview than I think Fuentes does, which is why I have a lot more grace towards different people of different identities, different ethnic groups, because I believe that shouldn't really determine someone's outcomes in life. That's a very Eastern way of thinking. I don't know.
And a lot of the anger at Israel, which is, I think, much of it merited, is the way it betrays universalism for the Palestinians living under its control.
Sure.
Right.
On the right, it's pushing towards ethno-state politics.
Right.
That the fundamental argument and a way in which modern Israel's tried to create new coalitions is to say, hey, we're all ethno-states here.
Right.
But once you buy into the ethno-state frame, then the fact that you see Jews as an ethnic other in your society pushes somewhere very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pushes towards ideas of expulsion, pushes towards ideas that they're a fifth column within, that they are leading your country to betray its actual interests in order to, that they have dual loyalties.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't agree. I don't know if even Nick would say that. I don't think Jews are a fifth column. I don't think they should be expelled at all. I think it's a terrible idea. And I don't even think Nick is an ethnostater. I think he's changed his tune quite a bit recently. Maybe he is an ethnostater deep down. I don't think so. I don't think Nick is an ethnostater. I've watched enough of his videos, and even had a clip that came out 2 weeks ago where he said that if you're an American, this is your birthright. He got a lot of flack for that from the white nationalist community. So I don't think he's an ethnostater. He's even condemned race idolatry on multiple occasions. But then again, like, I don't know what goes on inside Nick's mind. We can only make assumptions based on what he says. So, it's for him to clarify. But I agree with the general thrust of what they're saying. I don't know if you could apply it to Nick, but the general thrust is like, when you start treating a particular ethnic group as a flight risk, as a fifth column, as a enemy from within, yeah, of course you're going to move towards more extreme means of dealing with that group, which is like, we got to draw a hard red line on that. This is about Zionists and a particular group of Jews who are very influential in society who weaponize that against the masses. Just them. Let's just focus on them and those individuals who are doing it. Let's not make this a whole thing about Jews and Rome. And it's just, I'm not into that.
But there is this weird thing where there's been a rise of like Jewish figures or Jewish line figures who want to embrace ethno-state politics.
Sure.
I mean, you have like Yoram Hazony, Jewish, lives in Jerusalem, the founder of NatCon, going to the NatCon conference, which he started, saying, look, you have to like the Jews to be a national conservative.
But there's nobody ever said, and I this is for my Jewish friends, nobody ever said that to be a good NatCon, you had to love Israel. Nobody ever said that to be a good NatCon, you had to love Jews.
And so the one point of anger I have at a lot of people on the right who I think have been playing footsie with this for a long time.
I did not know Ezra Klein was Jewish, by the way. I just found that out.
Is that once you embrace the ethno-state concept, this is where that leads.
Well, I certainly am of that opinion. I think, again, let's take this from another angle. Like, the way you're talking is in terms is a little highbrow. It's in terms of
which is why I'm not an ethno-nationalist in a 40% non-white and 40% minority country. I think that's a horrible idea. I think that's the quickest way to get a civil war, my opinion.
Intellectuals like Yoram Hazony.
And to really like sever any ties between minority groups and non-white, or whites and non-whites in this country. It would pour acid on the social bonds if a white nationalist movement were to get any real political momentum. And I think it would end the urban-rural divide completely and really create the social conditions for a civil war. So, no, I'm completely against that.
But let's look at this from the ground up. Mm-hmm. You have a conservative movement that is embraced, as you said before, an extremely provocative tone, a tone of open bigotry in certain cases, right? And basically the deal that the pro-Israel right thought it could make is, we can engage in a good deal of racist demagogy. We're okay with it, especially maybe directed at Muslims, Islam. But the line that we draw is when it happens to Jews, when it turns into anti-Semitism. That is not a consistent...
That's true. That's also very funny. Like, you'll notice Laura Loomer spurging out on the timeline all day, every day, 25/8, about Muslims, Qatar, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iraq. Spurging out 24/7 about Muslims running the country, Muslim invasion, Muslim this, Muslim that, Dearborn, Michigan. Yet, the moment anybody says anything about Jewish people, you can't say that, that's anti-Semitic, oh my God. It's like, you can't have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So that's just my opinion. I think the whole thing is ridiculous.
Position. It's
a very inconsistent moral standard. That's all I'll say. It's a completely inconsistent moral standard if you're a Jew. It's just, you can't have it both ways. That's why I'm not racist towards anybody. And to the extent that I do have racist thoughts, I try to purge them because I don't like having that occupy my mind, and I don't like that to feed on my spirit or feed on my belief system and dictate my politics, because it leads you in horrible directions. But there are Jews who will do this. Laura Loomer, Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, Josh Hammer, usual suspects, who will fearmonger about Muslims all day long, say they're horrible, they're destructive, they're evil, they're terrorists, they're Hamas. None of them are innocent. They can't coexist with the West. There's a grain of truth to that, but only a grain. And you can't do this thing where you constantly fearmonger on the basis of race about Muslims, but then when it happens to you, you cry foul. It's a blatant double standard, obvious hypocrisy.
Extremely self-defeating position. So when I talk about groypification, I don't mean to say it's only that people with these extremely specific views about Israel and Jews are taking over the right. It is more that there's a general atmosphere of moral anarchy, of acceptance of extremely hateful and divisive views. So it's not, and that creates, as we've discussed, there's no immune system, there's no barrier to anti-Semitism.
Well, that also goes to the energy that MAGA Trumpism, that the modern right generates from transgression.
Yeah.
Once you have begun to exhaust the energy of transgression about how you talk about immigrants.
Yeah.
Trump comes down the escalator, says they're sending rapists and murderers over here. There's a big outrage. But now, being much more anti-immigrant on the right, I mean, that's de rigueur. Who cares?
Right.
Once you have moved past a bunch of the energy on dancing around racism,
Sure.
right? Once you have moved, on traditional gender roles, right? This is the boss battle of Western speech taboos.
Right.
That, and you have seen, this didn't begin last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
You saw Elon Musk respond to somebody laying down a conspiracy that it's Jewish elites pushing immigrant voters to take over the country by saying, you've really spoken the truth here. You have a lot of the podcast.
Did Elon Musk say that? That's fascinating.
Bro faction.
I did not hear about that.
That's turned more right, like Joe Rogan.
Right.
Bringing on revisionist historians.
Sure.
Who, was Germany really the bad guys in World War II? What kind of, what have we not been told about that?
Okay, hold on. Now they're going into a completely different thing. And they throw these terms around, revisionist, once again, linguistic spellcasting. So just discard that. Obviously, Hitler was objectively the evil person in World War II. I think that's undisputable. And the position I actually have a book right here about it. It's called Bloodlands. It's by Timothy Snyder. It's by Timothy Snyder. Fascinating book. And it's important to understand that Hitler, only 3%, and a lot of people might know this already, but for those of you who don't, take this into consideration. Only 3% of the Jews that Hitler killed were German. Only 3%. So between 1933 and 1945, when Hitler went on his mass murdering campaign, mass extermination, this genocide against Jews, only 165,000 of those, which was at the very beginning, were Jewish, which is still a lot. That's a horrible, evil humanitarian crime of grave proportions and should be universally condemned. But the vast majority of the Jews that he killed were from the Soviet Union, Ukraine, the Baltic states, and especially Poland. So only 3% of the Jews he killed were even German. He invaded other countries to kill those Jews. He didn't want any Jews in Europe, which is particularly evil. To invade other countries because you don't like an ethnic minority that happens to live there, that's one of the reasons, not the entire reason, but that's one of them, is evil on a grand scale. However, when you talk about bringing on historians to talk about World War II, maybe a lot of them fluff Hitler too much. That's bad. We shouldn't do that. But it's more so about getting this oppressive narrative from off of us, like the Holocaust, slavery, colonialism, World War II. It's we'll never be free to just talk about these things if we constantly have to make a million qualifiers, constantly have to be well, Hitler was a bad guy and this and that and so on and so forth. People want to be able to talk about these things historically in a way that's just open, where it's open. There's not all this political baggage. There's not all these narratives surrounding these things. And we want to free our consciousness from that so we can move forward as a society, so we can progress in the political conversations that we have and stop being shackled to like race politics and the Holocaust and all this kind of stuff. That's what it's about. That's what having these conversations is about. It facilitates a change in culture, a change in the way we talk about these things. And not everybody goes about it in the right way, but that's the general thrust of it. So, anyways.
And so you sort of bring these two things together, that you want to build an ethno-state and you're ideologically opposed to there being anything you can't talk about. And you make your money and your attention on these algorithms. And it's almost a hydraulic process towards anti-Semitism.
Yeah. The thing about a kick, getting excitement from it, Sartre said it's amusing to be an anti-Semite. There is something, look.
And also glazing Hitler, fluffing Hitler, it's just lame in my opinion.
Yeah.
People do it once again. It's the same thing with the woke people. It's just the opposite side. It's the same coin, opposite side. People do the whole Hitler thing to look base, to vice signal, basically. It's not my cup of tea. I think it's cringe. I think it's bad for society, actually.
Donnie, for example, who some people say is an anti-Semite because of his positions on Israel, he's very careful to say I'm not an anti-Semite and to express sensitivity to Jewish concerns
and go to synagogues. Yeah. And I mean, Mamdani's a liberal.
Okay, yeah, exactly, yeah, but he also does not, whatever you think is at the heart of his politics, he does not Jew-bait, right? He is not practicing a politics that is based on the enjoyment of the harassment and getting a rise out of Jews, in other words. And Fuentes absolutely does. Tucker does to a more subtle extent. Candace Owen does. And that also attracts people because, people who feel powerless are very attracted to it because, there's someone you can harass and pick on. And it's part of their strategy to kind of take over the right in their direction is to do this, in a way, workplace harassment against their Jewish allies, to bait them, to get them to overreact, to unsettle them. The other thing you mentioned is that the taboos are breaking down.
I don't know if it's that politically calculated. I think they're trying to outflank the neocons. They're trying to outflank the old guard of the right wing because they failed to deliver for the American people. And they're outflanking them by taking a more transgressive, taking a more bombastic approach, which has its flaws, but it's a necessary process in order for the right wing to reform itself. We have to put pressure on the Republican Party so that they actually submit to our demands and they actually follow through and they understand that if they don't, they will lose elections. There will be consequences. We will make it hurt if they don't move, maybe not further to the right, but if they don't actually deliver results for the American people. Mass deportation, sovereignty from Israel, campaign finance reform, economic populism, and corruption in the federal government, industrial policy, give people in Gen Z a better prospects for the future, affordable housing, maybe some form of subsidized healthcare, and just generally get down the cost of living. Like, we need the right wing to do those things. We need the Republican Party to do those things. And if they don't, we're going to pressure them.
Because, World War II and the Holocaust is a long time ago. And the generation that experiences is gone. And the politics that were created out of the consensus that it created is disappearing. So some of it is just the passage of time.
Again, this is tricky to talk about, but you can't get away here from how much Israel post-October 7th, the war in and the flattening of Gaza, has destabilized politics around this everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And again, I think the ways in which it has created tensions on the left have gotten most of the attention for the past couple of years. But in fact, it's cracking open the right. And you hear it in this Carlson Fuentes interview. You hear it in the questions getting asked of J.D. Vance at various events.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a Christian man, and I'm just confused why that there's this notion that we might have owe Israel something, or that they're our greatest ally. I'm just confused why this idea has come around, considering the fact that not only does their religion not agree with ours, but also openly supports the prosecution of ours.
Yeah, so...
Now, that MAGA on some level, it has really rooted itself in this semi-isolationist, very much America First position.
Right.
And this young, very online right, one, looks at what has happened in Gaza and I think correctly sees it as immoral.
Yeah.
But two, asks, why are we involved here at a time when we're pushing Europe out on its own?
Sure.
Right? When we are aggressively insisting that we have no stable alliances except what is directly in our self-interest at a given moment. There are ways, many, many, many ways to be anti-Israel without being anti-Semitic. But there is also a way in which the, I think, desire among Jews to say that what Israel is doing never can be connected to anti-Semitism breaks apart. And I never quite know how to talk about this except that I feel like we're all living through it right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, to put my cards on the table, I'm on the left side of the political spectrum, and I've been extremely critical of Israel and especially its conduct in the war, which I believe they probably committed a genocide, and absolutely extreme war crimes. But what happened also was the creation of an enormous amount of free propaganda for anti-Semitic agitators. And also a lot of people becoming curious about U.S. foreign policy, history. There is a certain extent to which they're grabbing a lot of people who otherwise would be getting involved in the political process in a really positive way. They say, why is American foreign policy like this? Should we be doing this? What's the history behind all this? Like, why are these people fighting? Why are they killing each other? They have legitimate and interesting questions. But instead, that curiosity, that legitimate curiosity, is being picked up by people who have another motivation here. I don't think that Tucker Carlson lost much sleep over the Arabs who died in Iraq.
War, I have I'm not defending the war in any way, but I just have zero sympathy for them or their culture, a culture where people just don't use toilet paper or forks.
And I don't really believe it when he now gets very sentimental about people in Gaza.
One of the reasons that I'm mad about Gaza is because the Israeli position is everyone who lives in Gaza is a terrorist because of how they were born, including the women and the children.
Okay, but hold on. That was 20 years ago. The clip they played was from 2006. This is from 2025, almost 20 years ago. And I'm not saying that Tucker Carlson is like this pure, authentic. I mean, Tucker Carlson is a part of the machine. Let's not kid ourselves here. But to play a clip from 20 years ago, as if that, I don't know. I don't know why people do that. People play these ancient clips and act as if like that is somehow reflective of who you are in the modern day, which is not always the case.
Children. That's not a Western view.
Like, look, where is this clip from? What is it? It says 2006. Yeah.
Culture where people just don't use toilet paper or forks.
And I don't really believe it when he now gets very sentimental about people in Gaza.
One of the reasons that I'm mad about Gaza is because the Israeli position is everyone who lives in Gaza is a terrorist because of how they were born, including the women and the children. That's not a Western view. That's an Eastern view. That's a non-Christian. That's totally incompatible with Christianity. So I hate that attitude. It's genocidal.
I think it's highly cynical. I think when Fuentes expresses some of the most, spiteful, dismissive attitudes towards human suffering you can imagine on his podcast, on his show. And then he gets very sentimental about this issue.
This is just a straight up genocide. These people are starving. They're literally dying. It would be formally called the famine, except that Israel will not let any international personnel inside the Strip to assess this, to make that declaration.
And, that is to drag people in and to think, well, these people have a heart and they're interested in the same topic as I'm interested in. I think it's highly cynical. I think one way...
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I think it's fair to be cynical about Fuentes and Tucker. And the reason why I say that is because Fuentes is somebody who laughed when Kilmar Abrego Garcia or some other illegal immigrant or immigrants who were from Latin America were being sent to or were being deported to Uganda. He laughed about that. And, you know, he talks about how liberals would show all these footages or photos and videos of illegal immigrants sleeping under, you know, tinfoil on the cold, hard, you know, tile inside of a fence at some detention facility in the southern border. And he'd laugh about that. And he'd talk about how liberals will use that against Trump to prevent him from doing mass deportations, which is why he has to do it now. Like, Nick Fuentes is not somebody who strikes me as being a bleeding heart, open, you know, a bleeding heart, empathetic individual who deeply cares about human suffering. I don't think he cares about those things. That's my opinion. Tucker, I don't know. But Fuentes, I don't think he gives a damn. I don't think he gives a damn. I think he just wants a pretext to criticize Israel. That's my opinion, and I agree with that, actually.
You can tell if these views are motivated by impartial analyses of American foreign policy or much more partial views about the Jews, is whether or not they tend to coexist with unrelated anti-Jewish conspiracies.
Right.
And so in some ways, what I found most telling was another clip from the Carlson Fuentes interview.
With OnlyFans, it's like having a TikTok. It's like, here's my link tree. Here's my Instagram account. Here's my Facebook account. Here's my YouTube. And here's my OnlyFans.
Why would any of this be legal?
I think that, well, there's, like you indicated, maybe there's an intelligence benefit to that.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a political benefit to that. I think that...
Well, why wouldn't you arrest the people who run something like that?
They should be. If you had a Christian government...
Or how about just a government that cares about its people? I mean, is Iran a bigger threat or is OnlyFans? Iran's not turning my daughters to prostitution.
So to even parse this clip, you have to know that one of the big anti-Semitic conspiracies of this era is it Jews in general.
That's definitely not how I read that clip, in all fairness. I did not see that as them trying to gesture towards anti-Semitism, but Ezra Klein is a Jew, so maybe he's more perceptive to it. I don't know.
Maybe the Israeli government in particular is behind a lot of porn.
The reason the Jews...
Or maybe I'm slow and just didn't pick it up.
...run the porn industry, I think, is because they're not Christian. And not only are they not Christian, but they're against Christianity. And the people that were the pioneers of porn, they are quoted as saying, this is like a middle finger to God.
Kanye West has talked about this. David Duke has talked about this. And here you have Fuentes and Carlson sort of gesturing at this. Maybe there's an intelligence benefit to all this porn we've got out there now. If you had a real Christian government, we wouldn't allow it.
Right.
And that's where I think you see something else is happening in the soil here, as opposed to just old school isolationism on American foreign policy.
Yeah, I mean, it's every dissatisfaction with the modern world, every social problem, you relate back to that issue. That's the explanation for it. It simplifies every single social issue, and it makes a recognizable enemy responsible for it. That's not new. You know, you have that same thing going back in European anti-Semitism, blaming every single social problem back to the Jews.
I think one of the things that has unnerved me most in the last few weeks was a tweet from Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation and the architect of Project 2025. And Roberts got himself in a lot of trouble. We'll talk about it for immediately coming out and defending Carlson. But around the same time, he had Jonathan Haidt, this sort of critic of the internet, at Heritage to talk about porn and digital addiction and other things. And he sends out this tweet. He says, "Thank you, John Haidt, for reminding everyone at Heritage yesterday that tech tycoons like Leonid Radvinsky and Solomon Friedman are profiting to the tune of millions by preying on America's young men and women. We are proud to be in this fight with you. It is time to arrest, prosecute, and convict the sick perverts behind OnlyFans and Pornhub."
Right.
And the key thing about this tweet is you could have chosen to single out no one. Or if you're going to single out only two people, there are a lot of people you might choose. Like the CEO of OnlyFans is named Kylie Blair. But Roberts, who is at the center of establishment Republican politics, the head of the Heritage Foundation, he chooses these two people with very Jewish names. It was very hard for me not to read this as Roberts, whoever's writing for him, is pointing towards some affinity.
Yeah, that is probably very poor. It's tone deaf for sure. What are the names of these two people? Because this is actually pretty interesting. So, Kevin Roberts, who's the director of the Heritage Foundation, which is the preeminent think tank for the current Republican administration, he put out a tweet on Halloween, or the day before Halloween, and the tweet said, "Thank you at John Haidt for reminding everyone at Heritage yesterday that tech tycoons like Leonid Radvinsky and Solomon Friedman are profiting to the tune of millions by preying on America's young men and women. We are proud to be in this fight with you. It is time to arrest, prosecute, and convict the sick perverts behind OnlyFans and Pornhub." Yeah, so Leonid Radvinsky and Solomon Friedman are obviously very Jewish-sounding names. I think to put that, tweet out in this climate, with the amount of rampant Jewish, like we talk about anti-Semitism, it's a kind of a word that gets thrown around, but we're talking about like real rabid, like just anti-Jewish identity. I think to put that out in this climate as the director of the biggest think tank in the United States of America, to make that is we'll just say at worst or at best, poor political calculation, at worst, signaling to open anti-Semites to get their affinity. Very strange. I'll give him that.
For him is pointing towards some affinity with this part of right subculture.
I think you're absolutely right to pick up on that. I mean, Pat Buchanan used to do this.
Yeah, like to just pick the two Jewish names, really? Like, yeah, it is. I wouldn't have done that.
What they used to say about Pat Buchanan is he always talks about Goldman Sachs, but not Morgan Stanley.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat Buchanan always would say when he was opposing some U.S. foreign policy thing that had some consensus behind it, he would mention Kissinger, he would mention Richard Pearl, he would mention those guys. Would he mention Jeane Kirkpatrick? Would he mention Alexander Haig? No. Some of those names, not important. So yeah, continually hammering on that is a big part of their politics. It's the center of their politics.
Yeah, it is. It is a plausible deniability thing. I will give them that, because this is something that, I like Tucker. I do. I agree with Tucker on a lot of things, but let's not be naive here. We have to be intellectually honest here. A lot of people on the right, especially people like Tucker Carlson, they'll do this thing where they will heavily imply what they're trying to say without saying the thing. So they have that gap of plausible deniability. So if people try to pin them down on the implications of what they're saying, or like the obvious logical conclusion of what they're saying, somebody like Tucker Carlson will be like, "Oh, well, I didn't literally say that," or "I don't mean all of them," or like he'll do that whole thing. And it's just like, we get what you're trying to do here. Like, just spit it out, bro. We're not stupid. We're not 5 years old. We weren't born yesterday. Like, just say what you want to say. Yeah, there is that kind of tactic that people do. I really don't like it when people do that, because it's not intellectually honest. I'll just say what I believe. I'm not trying to hide anything from anybody. I agree. I don't like when people do that. It's just strange. And also to always single out the Jewish people every single time. It's like at a certain point, it's not really a coincidence. It's just like, that's just what you believe. You believe there's something going on uniquely with Jewish people behind everything, which is, yeah, at that point you're just a low IQ anti-Semite.
But it just struck me, and this is true for Roberts and the way he responds to a lot that's happening, where you might think, oh, is this just the attentional side of the right? Is this just the people who are trying to create big events for the YouTube algorithm? And maybe it starts there, or for the X algorithm. Maybe it begins there. But when you see it jump these lines, you then also the Kevin Roberts response to the Carlson Fuentes interview, which, maybe it's worth watching that too, because I think it has some of these same dynamics.
This video was based. I actually like what Kevin Roberts said in this video. Hot take, but it's just true.
Loyalty as a Christian and as an American is to Christ first and to America always. When it serves the interests of the United States to cooperate with Israel and other allies, we should do so, with partnerships on security, intelligence, and technology. But when it doesn't, conservatives should feel no obligation to reflexively support any foreign government, no matter how loud the pressure becomes from the globalist class or from their mouthpieces in Washington. We will always defend our friends against the slander of bad actors who serve someone else's agenda. That includes Tucker Carlson, who remains, and as I have said before, always will be a close friend of the Heritage Foundation. The venomous coalition attacking him are sowing division. Their attempt to cancel him will fail.
He's in a bit of hot water for that now.
Like, I agree with everything Kevin Roberts said in that clip. Sorry, I just do. I think that was a great clip. I think he was coming out hot. And then he backed off what he said, and the National Task Force on Combating Anti-Semitism ended their partnership with the Heritage Foundation anyways, even after he apologized and got on all fours and crawled back to the people who were seeking to part ways with the Heritage Foundation. The donors, the billionaires, the people who put money into the donor advice funds. He had all these conferences, all these focus groups, put out all these tweets, publicly apologized, met face-to-face with powerful Jews, and they still threw him under the bus anyways. And, well, not just powerful Jews, other powerful white people and people who have, a stake in the GOP and in, foreign affairs and whatnot in U.S. politics. But it just goes to show, like, you come out swinging, you stand your ground, you apologize to the Zionist right, and what do? They cut your legs out from under you and throw you to the side, even after trying to make amends. So probably not a good move on their part. They probably should have brought him back into the fold as a signal to other people that, hey, if you apologize, if you work with us, we'll work with you. They chose not to do that. They took the hardline position. It is what it is.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
But that was his first instinct.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I think that
it was the right instinct.
It's his first instinct. He wanted to defend Tucker, who I think he views as extremely important part of the of conservative movement or the right wing now, and wants to maintain a relationship with him, obviously. But yeah, the Heritage Foundation is essentially part of the nervous system of the conservative movement. It's one of the important think tanks that comes up with policy that supports the work of intellectuals and elites and the conservative movement. And yeah, watching that and watching the institution seem to break in that direction was remarkable. And that caused a firestorm. He has apologized. He has walked it back. His friend Yoram Hazony flew in from Israel to try to sort things over. Yeah, it was a very weird video, and it struck me as almost coming from sci-fi. I was so taken aback by it. And then he falls back on what they all fall back on now is, anti-cancel culture, anti-wokeness, which means like, okay, there's no standards anymore. We don't cancel people.
But there's another interesting part of this when he says, my loyalty as a Christian and as an American is to Christ first and to America always.
Yeah.
One of the things that you see when you begin diving into the fissures on the right about this is for some time there's been a fairly close embrace between evangelical Christianity and Israel. And that has in some ways solved this coalitional problem on the right.
Mm-hmm.
And what you hear Fuentes doing, what you hear these people coming up and asking J.D. Vance questions doing, what you hear in some ways Tucker doing, is really saying that doesn't make any sense.
And then the Christian Zionists who are, Christian Zionists, like, what is that?
Right.
And I can just say for myself, I dislike them more than anybody, because like, what? Because it's Christian heresy and I'm offended by that as a Christian.
I mean, look, the attachment of evangelicals to Israel is a particular current in evangelical Christianity, dispensationalism. It's one that some argue has very deep roots in American past because of Calvinist ideas and American Christian Zionism going back to the founders. And there's something to that. But this emerges really as a mass phenomenon kind of in the 1970s, right? Where evangelical Christians are looking at what's happening in Israel as kind of signs of the coming apocalypse. And that becomes extremely popular. And Israel is befriended, is cultivated because they think it is about to bring about, the rapture and so on and so forth. Now, it's true. I think among younger Christians, younger evangelical Christians even, I'm not sure how much of a hold dispensationalism has anymore. It seems to be something that's of like a lot of the things we're discussing of older generations. So I think that appears to be changing. I agree with you.
But this goes to what you're talking about with Roberts. He did have to walk this back. He's apologized. He said he let Heritage down.
Mm.
This has led to a bunch of interesting reporting on what's been going on inside the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah.
And one thing you hear in that reporting is that there's a big generational split where older staffers were furious at Roberts and are standing up in meetings saying, the right, Bill Buckley always knew that you had to eject the anti-Semites on the right. I see you rolling your eyes. It's worth saying that Bill Buckley's the extent of his war against anti-Semitism has been overstated. Let's put it that way. But many of the younger Heritage Foundation staffers are standing up and saying, what did Kevin do wrong here? Right? If there's not room for what he said, is there not room for me? And I think this is getting at just this very big thing, which is, and it's what I sort of understood Roberts is doing, that you have a lot of people on the MAGA right trying to skate to where they think the puck is going.
Yeah.
And what they see among their staffers, among the people they interact with on social media, is that where it's going is around this much more, I would call it like white nationalist energy.
Yeah, I think that's a good read on this situation. Rod Dreher, a writer who I consider to be on the far right, but is horrified by everything that's going on. He wrote recently that a friend of his, who has connections to the Republican Party and the conservative movement, estimated that some 30 or 40% of young staffers were Groypers. And I would say to that, well, the other half are, maybe don't go to the last taboo of anti-Semitism, but definitely don't have any problem, throwing slurs around and trafficking and nasty ideas about that. That's my own commentary. But yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I think that there is a marked generation gap that the younger staff of the conservative movement are much more open to Fuentes' ideas. And they've also come up in a situation, they've been, since their introduction to politics, they've been suffused, come up in an environment that's filled with this. They don't know a world before it. It's their common sense in a way. So yeah, I think that they are struggling with the fact that they're probably, going to have staffing issues, and they already are.
And Trump has not criticized
No, he's
Fuentes.
not.
Like, Trump can weigh in on things when he feels like it. He called Carlson crazy when Carlson criticized him for the Iran bombing. Trump has notably not weighed in on this. Vance has only said he doesn't like the infighting.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think that the main reason is, look, Trump gets a lot of mileage about seeming out to lunch or in his own world. The fact of the matter is he's a successful politician.
Yes.
He understands, and he's always understood from the beginning, that this extreme right is a constituency that he can't really afford to alienate, that he has to court. I think his administration knows that they can't totally distance him from it. He's never completely distanced himself.
Also, his administration is full of these people.
Well, yes, that's true.
But maybe it was not as true in the first term.
No, and I think they're very interested in what this section of the right has to say, and they realize, this is part of our coalition. We cannot afford to alienate them and attack them.
So there have been conservative figures pushing back.
Sure.
Ben Shapiro has particularly, I think, gone to war
and
has tried to call this out and really try to play the old, at least mythological William F. Buckley role.
Right.
Trying to say, no, we don't do this.
Yeah.
We don't go to Groypers. We don't go to Nick Fuentes. Like, there are lines in our movement.
It's not a fight that Ben Shapiro can win. It's just not. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing, actually, because Ben Shapiro is the same guy who said you should not be able to, or you shouldn't feel entitled to live in the city where your ancestors lived if you can't afford it. He said it's not the responsibility of the government to make the city that your ancestors lived in, that your parents lived in, your grandparents lived in, where you were raised. It's not the job of politicians to find ways to make it more affordable. It's your job to suck it up and go somewhere else and start over. That's why people don't like Ben Shapiro. It's one of the reasons. And because he's an obvious hypocrite. We'll subsidize Israel's health care. We'll give them a 20-year memorandum of understanding where we give them $4 billion a year. They can expand settlements in the West Bank, start wars with other countries and drag us into them, bomb people whenever they want, violate every ceasefire we make them sign, use our prepositioned military hardware for their own military campaigns, even when we tell them not to, sell our military technology to China, annex the Golan Heights. I mean, they can do whatever they want and get away with it, and nothing ever happens. Invade Lebanon after Reagan tells them not to. I mean, the list goes on. They constantly transgress. They constantly violate our doctrine in the Middle East. And Ben Shapiro will say, we'll give them free health care. We'll subsidize them. We'll fight their wars. But if you can't afford to live in the neighborhood where your parents raised you, suck it up. Too bad. Tough shit, buddy. Go move somewhere else. It's like, what? So Israel can be a blood and soil nationalist country. That's the ancient homeland of the Jews. They're entitled to live there. And because of that, it is the obligation of the taxpayer in the United States to fund their health care and fund their military. But if you can't live in the country, or rather, if you can't live in the city where you grow up, too bad. So Israel gets to have those amenities, gets to have those benefits, but as Americans, we don't. And of course, he's a Zionist Jew, which is why people can't stand that. It's ridiculous. It's an obvious double standard.
What have you thought of Shapiro's response, the reaction to it?
A few things. First of all, the thing to remember about one of the other main figures on the anti-Semitic right is Candace Owens, right? Who was, birthed within the Shapiro organization.
So is that a term now? Anti-Semitic right? You see what I'm saying? These people just throw these terms around.
So think about that.
Well, hired by the Shapiro organization.
Hired by the Shapiro. Cultivated, turned into a star.
Yes. Part of them trying to skate to where the puck was going.
Right. To get a younger audience, to get a hipper, in the sense of conservatives, a hipper audience. And Mark Levin at the Republican Jewish Conference says,
What do you mean we don't cancel people? We canceled David Duke. Donald Trump canceled David Duke. We canceled Pat Buchanan. We canceled the John Birch Society. We canceled Joseph Sobran. We canceled pornography on TV. We cancel stuff all the damn time. Hitler admirers, Stalin admirers, Jew haters, American haters, Churchill haters. You're damn right we're going to cancel them and deplatform them.
I mean, it's too little too late. In my view, the opportunity has passed. Most of the people who saw where the Republican Party was going and didn't like it and were clear-sighted about it, went into the Never Trump movement, which was not politically viable, right? It's a group of people who I consider to have kind of preserved their honor, but don't have a mass constituency. The party's not there. These people stayed with MAGA. And everything it represented, the destruction of all these norms and institutions that would prevent something like this. And
yeah, what he's saying here is just objectively true. I mean, it's just true, right? Like you have people like Michael Medved, people like Charlie Sykes, who left the conservative movement when Trump took over because they didn't like how raunchy he was. They didn't like, all the racy, kind of like subliminally racist remarks that he was making back in 2015 about Mexicans, about thugs and all this kind of stuff. They didn't like his super hardcore anti-immigration stance. So people like Charlie Sykes and Michael Medved jumped off the Republican bandwagon like 10 years ago. But for the people who stayed on it and continued to defend Trump in and out, rationalize the things he said, now they're paying the toll for it. He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
I just am also extremely angry and frustrated with the pro-Israel and neoconservative right for looking the other way when it came to the racist takeover of the right. Zoran Mamdani, perfect example of this. What has happened in the wake of the giant controversies that exploded about Fuentes going on Tucker, the leaks of the chats? You have major figures on the right who are trying to redirect the conversation about anti-Semitism back to Zoran Mamdani. They're trying to make him the hate figure and to put...
Can't we all come together?
Yes. And so Ben Shapiro says, when has Tucker really criticized Zoran Mamdani, right?
The number of times that Tucker Carlson has mentioned Zoran Mamdani since October 5th on his show is once. And it was in the context of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson talking about the appeal of Zoran Mamdani.
And then Steve Bannon he attacks Mark Levin. He says these guys aren't really MAGA. And he has a point because they weren't back then. They weren't with Trump from the beginning. And then he attacks Mamdani.
Mark Levin, he just nothing but hot air. Mark Levin, instead of running your mouth, what are you doing in New York City? I tell you what we're doing. We're going to denaturalize Mamdani.
So it directs this energy, this energy of racial hate, really, that seeks to expel a racial other against the safer target, right? That strategy.
By the way, let me make it very clear. I do not like that. We're going to start denaturalizing people. Once you start playing with that kind of fire, once you open up that Pandora's box, you can't really walk that back. Okay, we're going to denaturalize Mamdani. Okay, fine. Okay, now we're going to denaturalize any Muslim who happens to run for Congress. We're going to start denaturalizing Ilhan Omar. We're going to start denaturalizing Omar Fateh. We're going to denaturalize Rashida Tlaib. We're going to denaturalize the Squad. We're going to denaturalize AOC. It's like, now it's just targeting racial. Now it's just racial targeting at that point. And once you start doing that, everything crumbles. Everything starts to fall apart. Societal trust starts to fall apart. Good faith politics starts to fall apart. Institutional norms start to fall apart. And from that point forward, you don't even know what comes down the road. Open violence, killing people, and then justifying it, and then rationalizing it. It's like, if you're going to deport people you don't like, denaturalize people you don't like, imprison people you don't like, that's a potential solution. It's like, once the state starts to get that involved with people's personal grievances about race, it doesn't go anywhere good. So Steve Bannon talking about, we need to denaturalize Mamdani. I hope he's just saying that to be edgy. I hope he's not being literal about that. But if he is, he's tripping. We have to be able to play by the rules and win. That's the problem. Like, we can't just start cheating. Like, because at that point, we're no better than the left. We have to play by the rules. We have to change the hearts and minds of people. We have to get into the institutions, get into the government, get into the think tanks, get into media, get into the institutions and the 501c3s, get into academia and higher education, and then penetrate society with our ideas because our ideas are better. That's how the right wing wins. It isn't by like cheating and taking shortcuts and abusing federal power and denaturalizing people we don't like. It's just like, I feel like that's just playing dirty, being cheap. And that's what the Trump administration is doing right now by deporting all these quote unquote anti-Semites, which, if they're here on a visa, they're kind of like an enemy of the state at that point. Fuck them, deport them. But if it's an actual U.S. citizen, okay, now you're taking it way too far. That's where I draw the line. And Mamdani has not committed any crime other than the crime of being a communist, which I think is disgusting and vile, but you can't deport the guy because of it. He won through democratic means. You got to take it. Too bad. If Trump wants to restrict federal aid to New York City because of that, let's do it. Let's play ball. We got to play hardball against these people. Send a message. But to denaturalize them, no, that's just, at that point, you're just cheating.
Is not working anymore.
That's not honorable.
That ability to keep the coalition by being like, look, just be as racist as you want, be as hateful as you want, but it's against its designated enemies that are okay. people ask a rational question. Well, why are these people off the table? And then, the answer comes back. It's like, well, because
wrong.
Christianity or because Israel it represents Western civilization or some kind of rationalization like that. And the anti-Semites say that makes no sense to us. And in a certain sense, yeah, why not? If the world is divided into these racial groups, and this is the way you are, and we practice a politics that's based on that, why make an exception?
I mean, as you say, these guys started as opponents of Trump in 2016. Shapiro said, Trumpism breeds conspiracism. Conspiracism breeds anti-Semitism. Trump is happy to channel support of anti-Semites to his own ends.
Who said this? This was in 2016? Oh, wow. Ben Shapiro said that in 2016. And the whole reason why Ben Shapiro hopped on the Trump bandwagon was because he understood he would isolate himself politically in the media if he didn't support Trump in 2016. Look at this. This is from the National Review. This is May 18th, 2016. This was a year. This was more than a year before Trump won the election in 2017. So this is from the National Review, which is, funnily enough, this was William F. Buckley's publication, I believe. I think it was it Buckley? I think this was Buckley's. Or Irving Kristol. No, it was William F. Buckley, I'm pretty sure. So this is from Ben Shapiro, May 18th, 2016, a year and a half before Trump won the election, or almost a year and a half before Trump won the election. Ben Shapiro picked up on this in 2016.
Shapiro said, Trumpism breeds...
Ben Shapiro, in an article that he wrote on the National Review a year and a half before Trump won the election, said Trumpism breeds conspiracism. Conspiracism breeds anti-Semitism. Trump is happy to channel the support of anti-Semites to his own ends. There you have it. Ben Shapiro played himself. He has nobody to blame but himself.
Conspiracism.
He betrayed his own position. So, and he did it for money. He did it for money. He did it for support. He did it for influence, and this is what he got. The chickens have come home to roost, as they would say.
Conspiracism breeds anti-Semitism. Trump is happy to channel support of anti-Semites to his own ends.
Okay, so Ben Shapiro, not a dumb guy. At that time.
If you go back and you read actually a bunch of what he said back then, it's very, very, very prescient.
The other thing is, what's the superpower they're going to suddenly discover that they're going to do that? They couldn't stop Donald Trump. They tried. Many of them tried. Ben Shapiro was an opponent of Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Mark Levin was an opponent of Donald Trump. So they're going to finally discover some new secret weapon
in 2024. I don't know where Levin was, but there was clearly an effort from Shapiro and others to make DeSantis the future.
Sure. And yeah, so I don't understand where they suddenly think they're gonna find the weapons or the army that's going to support them in this war.
Well, this is what I think is frightening when you look at their situation kind of coldly.
Yeah.
Their kind of last best hope is that they don't believe Trump himself is an anti-Semite. Their last hope is Trump himself. And I mean, they'll say that. But when I had Shapiro on the show, he was more or less saying that.
Yeah.
But they're all much more afraid of what's coming next, of J.D. Vance in particular, where I think the view many Republicans hold is that Vance is quietly, functionally where Carlson is. That Vance is Groyper adjacent, let's call it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And there is still an old line Republican party to some degree. You know, Ted Cruz have been coming out.
If you sit there with someone who says Adolf Hitler was very, very cool, and that their mission is to combat and defeat global Jewry, and you say nothing, then you are a coward, and you are complicit in that evil.
Lindsey Graham.
But I just want to make it really clear, I'm in the Hitler sucks wing of the Republican Party. What is this Hitler shit? I don't know. Anyway.
But it is the older Republican Party.
Right. I think that they've, they made a deal with the devil in a certain way, and now they're paying for the consequences. Now, another way to read this, obviously, it's all very scary, and these are bad things, and the transformation of the Republican Party into this stuff is not good. It wasn't great before, in my opinion, but now it's really something else. The other thing is, it's like, this might be a politics that ends up, when it's exposed to the public, being too weird and too fringe. It has some mass constituency. Will it do well in a primary? Yeah, maybe, probably. Will it do well with the rest of the public? I don't know.
Well, it's done well in primaries before. I think this actually gets to something important. So your book is very much about Pat Buchanan and earlier strains of this.
Yeah.
For those who didn't grow up in the politics of the 1980s and 1990s or didn't write a best-selling book on it as you did, who's Pat Buchanan?
Pat Buchanan is a major figure in the conservative movement. He was a member of the Nixon administration. He kind of represented the ideological conservatives, like the Buckley conservatives, the National Review crowd within the Nixon administration. He then went on to be a very important syndicated columnist, appeared on TV. He was a communications director for some time in the Reagan administration. Important, loud voice on the right. He ran a few primary campaigns, one in 1992, which my book focuses on, which wounded George H.W. Bush's candidacy. So there was kind of a constituency for his type of politics. He is also probably the person who expressed anti-Semitic views in public, the most notable anti-Semite in American politics for a very long time.
I always think of this clip of Trump talking about Buchanan is worth revisiting.
How about Pat Buchanan? Like when you say anti-Semite, what do you mean? Like you got to define it, man. It's like anti-Semite means so many different things at this point. Criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic. Saying Jews have a lot of power is anti-Semitic. I don't think that's anti-Semitic. I think that's just stating the obvious. And I've already defined anti-Semitism. It is making conclusions about a Jewish person based solely on the fact that they are Jewish. That is anti-Semitic. That's anti-Semitism. That's not what, I don't think that, maybe Pat Buchanan was doing that. I don't know. I just don't like it when people are very loose with their definitions about things that have this much impact.
I always think of this clip of Trump talking about Buchanan is worth revisiting.
How about Pat Buchanan? What do you think of that? Now, he seems to be the guy you'd have to battle.
Well, that's true. He's anti-Semitic. He's anti-black. He obviously has been having a love affair with Adolf Hitler in some form, and I just can't imagine this guy.
Wait, I don't want you to hold back. Give me how you feel now. I mean, these coy answers.
I can't imagine, that Pat is going to be very seriously taken as a candidate.
So that's an earlier Trump incarnation,
right?
Flirting with a third party run for president.
Yeah.
We often talk about the way Trump has been very consistent on certain things like trade since the 80s, but not on everything.
There was a man, Pat Buchanan, a good guy, conservative guy. And it's not that Pat Buchanan. Look at that. Good guy. Wow. Young people, they know him. Pat Buchanan, right? We know Pat Buchanan. He came in second in the New Hampshire primary. And for 45 years, he made an unbelievable career of it. He was a hot item. He was on every show. He came in
and
second.
It's been interesting watching so many of these figures, Nick Fuentes being one of them, but not by any means alone. Kevin Roberts, all of them, really rehabilitate Pat Buchanan.
Sure.
I think the Republican Party used to pride itself on not going down Buchanan's lane. It went down another lane instead, George H.W. Bush and then George W. Bush.
Yeah.
But it seems like now Buchananism is winning.
That's the thesis of all the work I've been doing for the past decade in my book. Yes, I think that's true. And actually, it was interesting. At the beginning of this presidency, I thought, oh man, I got something a little bit wrong. It's Pat Buchanan plus you got to be nice to Israel, right? So they're like, okay, we can be the trade stuff, the immigration stuff, but we're going to keep in place in order to keep the coalition together, this reflexive support of Israel, partly to do with Jewish Republicans and partly to do with Christian evangelicals. And then when this explodes, I was like, oh, well, I guess that never fully went away and it wasn't totally submerged and this coalition wasn't that stable.
Well, also it gets to this point that Buchananism has an internal logic.
Yeah.
And when you embrace it, it becomes hard to embrace 80% of its logic, but not 100% of its logic. So there's this book Buchanan wrote years ago called The Death of the West.
Yeah.
J.D. Vance has said it is the first political book he ever read. How would you describe the Death of the West thesis and how it relates to modern Republican Party politics?
It basically describes a world where the white race is submerged by the invasion of brown peoples, and that needs to be prevented by any means necessary. Essentially, it's a work of polite white nationalism.
And there's a tremendous amount about fertility rates in it. I mean,
yes.
Even in the first...
See, but that's the thing. Like okay. I want to be very careful about how I unpack this, because you have to be surgical about these things. If you are a white conservative and you understand the gravity of the situation that the United States and Western civilization is in, it is undergoing rapid demographic change, which is true. Obviously, it's undeniably true. The birth rate of not just white people, but people across Western civilization, but especially white people, is declining, which suggests that quality of life or family formation has become more difficult due to economic realities. And in the industrial world, because people are working so many hours, because people have to provide for themselves, and that's already difficult enough as it is, because people have all this pressure to go to college and get a degree, and that's necessary in many regards to be financially set and be financially stable. Then you got to pay off all this debt. It's very difficult to start a family, and so people feel that squeeze, and the realities of this are playing out in the demographics with the declining birth rates. So there's that element to it. There's the economic element to it, which is undeniably real. The demographic element to it, which is undeniably real. There's a kind of social cohesion that's beginning to degrade, that's beginning to fall apart because of the rejection of assimilation into the United States, into parts of Western Europe by people who come in. There is a kind of hostility towards the dominant culture. There is, how do I put it? There is, I guess, to a lesser extent, the United States, but especially in the United Kingdom, where you have Muslims creating their own parallel societies, and this is well documented. This is just a fact. It's just something that's happening. There's parts of the UK, parts of London you go to that are 80% Muslim. They kill someone, they commit a crime, they run somebody over, there's a robbery. They won't report that to the local constable or the local police because Muslims don't rat on other Muslims. So it's basically an invasion. It's clash of civilizations. You have one group coming to another territory where they're not native to, creating a parallel society, creating an enclave, abiding by their own social rules and violating the pre-existing social contract to serve their own interests. Obviously, that is not going to be taken well by the native population, who just happens to be white in this case. This is normal across all civilizations, you would think. There's that element to it. And you do have the fact that Christianity as a religion is declining. It's being replaced by this secular, liberal, global homo, very technocratic, very bureaucratic, very futuristic, dynamic that's at play here, which is kind of rejecting everything that made Western civilization so special and so great. A lot of it had to do with Christianity. And so if you're somebody like a Buchanan, what you're saying makes perfect sense, and there's actually a lot of truth to it. Now, I want to be very careful about how I parse this. I agree with the general thesis in The Death of the West. James Burnham talked about this going all the way back to the 60s. And he talked about how liberal academics and these intellectuals became very anti-nationalist. They became very morally relativist, which has basically created a society in which, you just live and let live. You just tolerate other people. You don't call out people for doing drag queen story hour, which is ridiculous. It's not moral. It's not Christian. It's very weird, actually. It's very invasive. It's very gross. And this is the kind of society that you create. There is no transcendent moral order. It's just anybody can do anything, and morality is subjective, and there's no consistent standards, and everybody's kind of like in their own world, and there is no expectation of morality or decency or charity even. And now we're dealing with this culture where it's like super woke. You can be LGBT, gay, black, anything. And if you say anything about somebody else and you say, white people be like, it's completely acceptable. Like, this culture is very weird. So from the perspective of somebody like Buchanan or a white person, you'd be like, yeah, there's something deeply wrong with this that needs to be resolved. Now, the conclusions that they draw might be we need to push out all the non-whites. That's where I say no. I say we need to focus on creating a new moral order, one that's based on Christian values, one that's based on a civic identity that actually matters, one that's based on common courtesy, common morality. And we say civic, when I talk about civic, we're talking about citizenship, which even if you're not racially European, ethnically European, racially white, whatever, citizenship means something. Unquestionably, we are constituents of a nation. We are members who exist, people that exist in a unique civilization that has a history. And citizenship has deep historical significance going all the way back to the Roman Empire. And citizenship means you defend the civilization, you defend the country that you're a part of, not betray it, not screw it over. You work within it to improve it, which is in many cases existing or coexisting with the majority population. This is not like an extreme idea here. Now, a lot of these people take it to like this racialist ideology, which I'm totally opposed to. If our society is to survive and not balkanize. So I don't know if he's accurately representing what Buchanan is saying, but I don't know, like they've oversimplified when they start saying, oh, it's about brown people coming in here and all this kind of stuff. I mean, look, it's a rapid demographic change. Like, it's a real conversation that needs to be had. Sorry, just true. Anybody would be willing to have that conversation. If Japan went from 99% or 95% Japanese to 60% Japanese in 40 or 50 years, everybody's supposed to just like not address the elephant in the room? Obviously, that's ridiculous. So you can't hold white people to a different standard that you hold Japanese people to, and vice versa. Ethnicity matters, race matters, demographics matter. Not in the sense that there's like this essentialist, like biological determinism thing to it, but in the way that culture and politics are shaped and the way the trajectory of your civilization goes, or the trajectory of your country goes, demographics matter. And this is why Singapore has controlled their demographics for as long as they have, because we're humans, we're people, we have identities. Like, these things matter. It's just what it is. You can try to write that off, but you're not going to get very far.
Trump term reading it, it was striking to me.
You have to work within that reality.
How much the modern right had fully absorbed this book by this guy who was, pushed out to the margins, or it seemed to be, for a long time.
Right.
But I mean, now I think if you're going to pick a founding text for MAGA, people talk about all kinds of different, weird thinkers, but Death of the West by Buchanan feels to me like a pretty fair center of the canon.
I mean, but people have been talking about the Death of the West for a long time. Douglas Murray, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Coleman Hughes, Donald Trump. Who else? Who's that guy from the UK? Not Corbyn, the other guy. What's his name? It's slipping my mind. Ben Shapiro's talked about the Death of the West. Buchanan's talked about the Death of the West. I mean, this is not like anything. James Burnham, like, this is nothing new. People have been talking about the Death of the West for a long time. Buckley talked about the Death of the West. People talk about this for a long time, and this really has a lot more to do with liberalism and the abandonment of Christian values and people not starting families, people becoming very gay, everything is morally subjective. That is a lot more in line with the traditional thesis about why the West is dying, not just, too many brown people. Bureaucracy taking over, replacing actual entrepreneurship, actual innovation. So anyways, people, it's not like, they act like this is like some like new thing. People have been talking about the Death of the West for 40, 50, 60 years now. This is not a new idea.
Yeah, I mean, look, critics of the right have often said there was a racial subtext to Western civilization. In the way Buchanan used it, it's not a subtext. It's what Western civilization means. It means white people. It doesn't mean Homer and Dante and Plato and so on and so forth, or ideas.
That is weird if that's his thesis.
Means a certain race.
When you talk about civilization, okay, let's be very specific about this. Huntington talks about, actually, let me, do I have the book with me? I might have the book with me. Give me a second. This is actually important. So this is actually very interesting. So I'm reading this book. It's called Who Are We? I don't know if it'll focus. Anyways, so reading this book called Who Are We? Pretty far into it, about a third of the way through. But this is from Samuel P. Huntington, and he talks about civilizations and what defines a civilization. And it says there's multiple ways, there's multiple identities, or there's multiple ways to define identity. There's ascriptive, and ascriptive means biological, race, kin, gender, ancestry. But then there's other forms of identity: cultural, territorial, political, economic, social. When we talk about cultural, we're talking about language, nationality, religion, and civilization. So Western civilization is not just an ascriptive identity insofar as it only discusses ancestry, only discusses kin, which is blood relatives, only discusses ethnicity or race. Civilization is mostly defined by culture. It's mostly defined by politics. It's mostly defined by territory. It's mostly defined by economics. It's mostly defined by social values. Western civilization is much deeper than just white people. The Romans did not even think the Germans were capable of creating a civilization. The Romans thought, and the Greeks as well, but the Romans especially, I think it was the Romans, or I don't know if it was the Greeks, but it was definitely the Romans, thought that the Germans would always be like this nomadic, tribal people who could never build civilizations, and all they did was kill and destroy, which is why they had them as mercenaries. When you talk about Western civilization, it's a culture, and that culture is defined by language, it's defined by nationalities, it's defined by religion, in this case Christianity, but it's also defined by territory, which is Western Europe, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the United States, and it's defined by politics, which is liberal and democratic. It's also defined by ideologies, which is free market capitalism, laissez-faire, Keynesian economics, some elements of populism, definitely though liberalism for sure. And then of course there's economics, there's social norms, things of that nature that define Western values, mental habits, an emphasis on liberty, freedom. So no, Western civilization is more than just kin. It would be ridiculous to define it like that, because there's different cultures and different ethnicities within Western civilization that create different societies. So no, I don't understand why Buchanan would just say it's just a white people thing. It's more than that. Every civilization is more than that. It doesn't make sense.
Stock that makes up Western people.
Oh, stock. Yeah. See, when people start talking about stock, I just like, see what you're talking about.
And basically the division on the right now
but
is...
also to act like a society or a civilization or a nation is only defined by, like race doesn't mean anything. Demographics don't mean anything. That's just obtuse.
Are Jews part of that Western white people?
So I guess one thing that part of this conversation then reflects is how much of this is all the internet and attentional dynamics. And as such, we are moving into this structurally, and there aren't very good political answers to it. I mean, you've had this line that one could even say that the internet itself is anti-Semitic, which also was a kind of provocative line.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, because you've been writing more. You gave the speech at U Chicago where you're talking about the sort of modern version of fascism as a response to the way the internet has destabilized the way we communicate in the sort of political sphere. How much do you see what we're in as a structural feature of the medium on which politics now primarily, certainly political communication primarily takes place? Like, what follows from an analysis like that?
Well, I mean, the comment about the internet being structurally anti-Semitic, very speculative theory of mine that I cannot defend right now. But obviously the change in the way people consume media creates the possibility for new communities to form, right? People who would generally be cranks and fringe people with a few audience members find mass audiences, right? So there's a component of that. There's also the fact that the internet it's almost like the birth of cities, is the way I think about it. It's almost like urbanization. It creates an enormous amount of what you might call sanitary problems. Like it creates an enormous amount of waste, pollution, and stuff like this. And we haven't come to a way of being like, okay, well, we're going to decide how we govern this new city. It's very interesting, though, like where do people get into this stuff? You mentioned pornography, right? It comes from this really seedy underbelly of the internet, the bulletin boards or message boards, 8chan, 4chan, et cetera, like that. It comes from a community that, consumes porn, very edgy porn, sometimes illicit porn. It came from the same, underbelly, the sewage of the internet from the gutter. It is, the favorite ideology of the very people who, sometimes have addictive relationships to those things. And feel entirely disempowered to detach themselves from it. Feel like they have no lives or future. The internet is their only life and future. But it also presents itself as a politics that would solve those problems. All of the things that happen because of modernization or the creation of these new structures, we have the answer to fix them all. It's interesting, Fuentes openly says, like, I'm one of those guys, right? He's like, I'm kind of a loser, an incel, there's no women in my life, et cetera, et cetera. But the way he does that and the way he attracts an audience and the way he entertains his audience is when he has their questions come on, he sadistically attacks them, right?
What do you mean, what do I think? That's your question? So Byron Donald, some like black Republican bench warmer, gets up at the RJC and says, I love Israel, I support immigration. You say, what do you think about that? What do you think I think about that, dipshit? That's your question? The show is like, we hate immigration, we're against Israel. Hey, so this guy says he likes immigration in Israel. What do you think about that? That's your question? What do I think about that? What do you think I think about that, you fucking idiot?
Because essentially, like, that's at the root of it.
That'll always, it's funny that he plays that clip. That'll always be one of the things that bewilders me the most about the Fuentes orbiters. It's the people who super chat every night, the same names, hundreds and hundreds of dollars out of their hard-earned, money from their own hard work. And they give this guy hundreds of dollars for him to basically give them the middle finger for an hour, 2 hours, while he's reading these super chats. It's the most absurd thing on earth. It's like this kind of humiliation ritual that these people have. And it's, it comes from this narcissistic perspective where he has to constantly degrade or constantly demean his audience so that he feels better about himself or he reaffirms his own superiority. Which is weird. At least that's the way I read into it. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze, but like this is a common trait that people who have a big ego, this is something that they commonly tend to do. So I've always just found that very weird. Like, why are people donating so much money, hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands of dollars every night for this talk show host to talk down to them? It's the most insane thing to me. It's bewildering.
It's about a certain type of...
It's a certain kind of loyalty that I don't get.
Powerlessness that comes to express itself in sadism. There is a degree of self-loathing among these people that it can't also be discounted. There's a degree to which they have accepted their position as being kind of outside of society, as being unrepresented, and they just want to burn it all down.
I think I have this theory about Twitter.
Yeah.
Which is that whichever political coalition is in control of it at a given moment is going to pay dearly for that.
Yeah.
So I think that, the left sort of had the wheel on Twitter, around 2020, and by 2024, a lot of the positions that got taken for that reason, a lot of the culture that emerged on it ended up proving a profound political loser. And I remember people being terrified on the left when Elon Musk bought it. But what I see is the right is becoming Twitter poisoned, X poisoned.
Yeah.
And, that guy in a basement making fun of his followers, claiming to be an incel politics.
Right.
It's very, I've spent the last week immersed in prep for this.
Yeah.
And you begin to think it's the world.
Yeah.
And then you look up and you kind of shake your head and you remember it's not.
No.
And most people don't want this and have no, and the right seems so hooked in to its own attentional drugs at the moment.
Yeah.
And J.D. Vance, who seems to want to be the future of the right, is very, very, very hooked in to its weird subcultures. And he has said that himself. That I wonder if, one thing you hear Shapiro keep trying to say to them is this is going to be a loser. And I don't think it's specifically the anti-Semitism, though that too, but the whole gestalt of craziness, like Laura Loomer and Candace Owens. And there's just so much as they try to absorb this in, and Tucker Carlson. And if I were to have some optimistic gloss on any of this, and I don't feel great about it, it's that that's a pretty weak politics, particularly after Trump, who has a very particular showman's capability and, role in American culture.
No, I think your point about Twitter being
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about Twitter. And, personally, I had to take some time off of Twitter because, it is just a cesspool of the most retarded, degenerate, hateful, bitter people and posts on any social media platform. It's completely unparalleled. And, people are attacking Dinesh D'Souza, Vivek Ramaswamy, Brandon Tatum, calling him the N-word, and you're brown, you're a brownoid, you're a third worlder, go back to India. And it's look, I get it. People are going to have their fun. They're going to talk mess on the internet. I've gotten it. People have been like, oh, you're a mulatto, you're a mixed breed, you're this, you're that, you're a brownoid. It's I'm used to it, right? And it's nothing new. It's not a big deal. But it is just one of those things where it's this addiction that a lot of right-wingers seem to have to being transgressive, being racist, and when I say racist, I do mean just openly using racial slurs towards people who are of that race. Being racist, being hostile. It seems like this is what they don't understand is it's bad optics. It's optically bad. Even a lot of conservatives and MAGA supporters who are in the MAGA coalition would think it's bad. When this e-girl quote tweets Brandon Tatum and is calling him a monkey and the N-word, people actually don't, that's actually not popular in society because it shows a lack of home training and a lack of manners. And people who have manners and courtesy and are decent people tend to find that to be a turnoff. I know I do. So people take the bait on that. And I get Twitter is an open platform. People say what they want. But you cannot let Twitter determine what you think is real because it will mess your head up. Twitter will create a completely false sense of reality if you are on it all the time. And I know when I was on it 4 or 5 hours a day, I thought the world was over. And it's rationally, I knew the world wasn't over, but my brain and my subconscious was trying to tell me that the world is over. And that's the weird part. Rationally with your conscious mind, Twitter, people being openly racist, saying all this crazy stuff, that's not what the real world is like. What the real world is like. Americans are not actually like that. But when you spend all your time on that app, arguing with people, responding to people, quote tweeting, reposting, commenting, you spend so much time, just so much mental and emotional energy on Twitter submerged in it. Now I just go in there to get a laugh. But when you go in there and you exhaust all this emotional energy and you're just submerged on Twitter, God, I'm messing up, Twitter online beefs, it really does skew your perception of reality in the worst ways imaginable. So you really you got to get off Twitter, man. And it's rationally, this is not the real world, but your brain is trying to convince you it is. It's a very strange dynamic.
kind of a mixed blessing, or I think it's extremely useful when you're kind of putting together the campaign and the coalition and about to launch an attack. Mm-hmm. And when you're in power, you need to have normal democratic tools to understand where the electorate's at. And the types of explanations, ideas, memes on Twitter are a different reality. And it interprets what's going on in the rest of the world in a very distorted way, right? So, an election happens, there's a negative result for your party. A normal political mind would say, maybe some of our messaging is bad, our policies are bad. The electorate is expressing issues with us. That gets metabolized in Twitter and all kinds of insane conspiracies and so on and so forth. So it definitely distorts what the notion of the rights public is. Now, that's very dangerous because they're living in kind of another reality. But it also, when they're in a democratic society, it detaches them from the things that they could do to alter course. And I think that it's still true that a lot of the things that we're talking about are, as they say, very online and attract a kind of subculture. My only warning about that is, I think that, a lot of young people grew up online. That's not, a lot of people are very online. It's not that different from the norm.
But what I would say is that I think sometimes we can overstate how badly the young people are doing politically.
Yeah.
And what I mean by this is the 2024 election scared the hell out of Democrats about what was happening with Gen Z.
Yeah.
And rightly so. Right? Huge swing towards Trump. And so then when somebody like Nick Fuentes, self-described, incel and brain-poisoned edgelord comes up and says, I am speaking on behalf of these young men, he has a tendency to say, well, okay, I don't understand these young men anymore. Maybe he is.
Right.
And then I look around. If you look at who Trump has lost support among, it's young people. Right. He is cratered among young people. You look at how Zoran Mamdani did in the election among young men.
Yeah.
Incredibly well.
Right.
That the idea that the center of Gen Z culture is Nick Fuentes is also wrong.
It's totally
and I think
wrong.
is a weird way. One thing you often see, I think, is that old people don't understand young people.
Right.
And so they are a little bit gullible about anyone arising with some amount of constituency saying, I speak for the young now.
Yeah.
And, so young people care about the cost of living, right? They swing around based on that.
Right.
It just, there seems to me to be something here that even, I don't think the Republican Party has the pulse of the young.
No.
It's that it has the pulse of its online young.
Yeah.
And that is a very malformed sense of even the young public.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I do think, though, it must be admitted that this is a party with mass support, and it increasingly has taken...
No, they're kind of contradicting what they said earlier. I mean, earlier he said that half of the staffers for the GOP, 30 to 40%, were Groypers, and the other 30, 40%, a significant majority, were Groyper adjacent. So there's obviously something to this phenomenon. You can't really downplay it. It is real, and they're using mass media to gain this following. Nobody knows exactly how heavily correlated it is to the real world, but there's obviously something to this. There's no question about that.
A message to try to get people who feel disaffected with the way things are going. So if there are a lot of other shocks, and there isn't some way in which the country gets on a footing where people feel like they can be prosperous, where they can have decent lives, and these pathologies continue, that politics is going to get an additional purchase.
I mean, it's one of the big dangers with America's two-party politics.
Right.
If one of the two parties becomes extreme, then it doesn't take that much for the extreme wing to come into power, right? You can take over a party with a fairly narrow part of that party being well organized.
Yep.
Different candidates split support in the primaries, and all of a sudden you have Trump in 2016, or maybe J.D. Vance loses in 2028, but then there's a big recession,
right?
And Tucker Carlson runs in the 2032 primaries, or somebody who's Tucker pilled or whatever it might be, and the issue you have there.
That's a funny name, Tucker pilled. He's Tucker pilled. That's funny.
Is that if the Democratic Party, for one reason or another, becomes unacceptable to people, then the fact that the Republican Party is run by Groyper extremists, you make a couple political moves to the center and hide it a little bit during the election, then you're in real trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, my sense of our politics now is that on the one hand, the Republican Party is weakening itself, and on the other hand, the possibility of 20th century calamity style outcomes just keeps going up.
Yeah, I agree with you. But, here's the thing about every single election happens, and Americans say, This proves our theory of the case. The country has fundamentally changed. Here are the people who are important. Here are the people that are not important. This party has shown itself to be totally out of touch with the American people. This party is the wave of the future. And then another election happens. That narrative is forgotten or is proven to be false very quickly. We don't really know what the electorate looks like until Election Day. So we're always kind of guessing and saying, oh, well, there's a lot of these kind of people, a lot of this kind of people. We don't know what messages are going to be successful. Things come out of nowhere. Things disappear. Coalitions are never permanent. They're very fragile in American politics. They fall apart quickly. As you mentioned, the loss of young people, the loss of independents who weren't, watching Nick Fuentes. They were pissed about their groceries. They were pissed about not necessarily being able to buy a house. So I don't think, I'm of two minds of it too. I do believe that there is a weakening of the party's mass appeal through its moving towards the other things. But my only worry about that is like these things have sophisticated techniques of propaganda to get mass support. And Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes are exhibiting those things. They know what they're doing. They know they are not the Nazis of yesteryear who were skinheads and put swastikas everywhere and scare people. They know how to deliver this message.
Once again with the Nazi stuff. Ugh. Same old.
In a way that's palatable or more palatable. My sense of things in America is that if a message comes along that is, yes, there are problems with the establishment, but we need to make some changes to the way our economy works. And I don't particularly hate or want to kill or harm anybody. That message is going to be a lot more successful with people because I think most Americans are, not obsessed with sadistic fantasies of harming each other. So I don't think it's an inevitability that those politics will take over. But I do believe there are conditions under which they become more appealing and stronger. And it's, a lot of the kinds of social dislocations we're experiencing now.
And then always our final question. What are 3 books you recommend to the audience?
Okay. So I'm going to recommend 2 recent books and an old book. And they're about this subject. This is not for reading for fun. One is Taking America Back by David Austin Walsh, which is a kind of history of the right's half-hearted, let's say, attempts to police anti-Semitism. One is Furious Minds. It's a new book by Laura K. Field, which is about MAGA intellectuals, the new right, and how they justify, explain, rationalize the things that are going on, give arguments for it. And the third one is a very old book and a little bit forgotten. It's called Prophets of Deceit, Techniques of the American Agitator, and it's by Leo Lowenthal and Norbert Guterman. And it's a extremely astute, detailed analysis of the techniques of anti-Semitic agitation and propaganda, especially in the context of the United States.
John Gans, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like Ezra Klein. I think that was a good interview. That was a really good interview. God, 3 hours long. So, what to say about that? Where to even start? Man, there's so much to say. I think for me, and I think the reason why, and I want to try and be a little bit optimistic here. I think the reason why people are so drawn to Fuentes and Tucker Carlson is because they hit on a lot of the core subjects that people just agree with. Like, let's just be real. People want to decouple from Israel. People are done fighting wars in the Middle East. We're done with forever wars. Crime is rampant. The cities are crumbling. People are sick of mass immigration. People are sick of H-1Bs. People are sick of mass legal immigration, not just illegal. People want mass deportations. People want a wall by the southern border. People are sick of the corruption in the federal government, Epstein, Monica Lewinsky, all the rest of it. And people want affordable housing and want families, safe communities. and they want low cost of living. That's it. Like, it's very simple. The formula is very simple. Oh, and we want reindustrialization. We want industrial policy. That's it. People don't want a race war. People don't want a boogaloo. People don't want to denaturalize non-whites from the United States and deport them because of their skin color. That's not where the electorate is. That's not what they want. People just feel pinched. People feel pinched emotionally because of the things that are happening in this country culturally. People feel pinched financially because of the economics. And people just want to have a country that feels unified, that feels culturally and socially cohesive. They want a country that is affordable, and that's it. And they want families. And Tucker Carlson and Fuentes hit on all those points, and they bake a lot of stuff in that you could leave out. And those are things that I would like to leave out. Those are things that I will leave out. But generally, like, they get it right. They hit the nail on the head in ways that somebody like Ben Shapiro doesn't seem to be able to. It's very simple. And that's just what it is. And I will say this. This was a good interview from Ezra Klein. I know I go a little bit hard on these people sometimes with the names, because I don't like when liberals just throw names at people and just dismiss their argument. I really don't like that. I don't like when anybody does it. But the left does it constantly with the Nazi, fascist, racist, sexist, homophobe, xenophobe thing. It's just like, come on. Are we not past that point now? But anyways, that's all I have to say about that. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Last thing I will say is go subscribe to my channel, my other channel. Well, me and my friend Chuck, we're starting a podcast. It's called The New Consensus. I'm going to leave a link in the description. We're going to do a weekly podcast, I think, every week, hopefully. We're going to be doing a weekly podcast, probably every Tuesday or Wednesday. We're going to be talking about things like this, cultural commentary, politics, geopolitics, and just two guys who love America, want to set it straight, want recourse, want to improve the lives of people who live here, want to build a unified country. So it's a positive vision. So anyways, I'm going to leave that link in the description. It's called The New Consensus. Go follow the channel, go subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And like, subscribe, leave a comment. And until further ado, I'm out. Thanks for watching.